Welcome back to HPP, the podcast that talks with tomorrow's hoop stars. I'm Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. Today, I am joined by the Bay Area Bomber, Drew Barton, and Jake Kopsick. Jake, how you doing?
Good, little tired, but that's all right. We get to talk about my favorite conference and right in my element, staying up a little bit later to talk about it. Temple volleyball been away last couple weeks, so weekends haven't been jam-packed with volleyball lately, so I've been watching a lot of football now that football started. But yeah, we're doing well. Always great to talk college hoops.
Yeah. And how are you doing, Drew? How's Sonoma State going?
It's good. We're kind of full. Jay kind of hinted on it. We're on full volleyball, full soccer season right now. So we got those sports going on. Basketball teams are back in the gym for us, which is nice. They're still on limited practice hours. Usually practice is like capped out at like an hour and a half, all the, NCAA regulations, but it's good. I've been in the gym with the teams, getting to know the players, getting to know the coaches. I've already got to photograph a couple of women's practices. The men's team invited me in to kind of record and photograph their weightlifting session the other day. So building up some goodwill, and I have a meeting with the women's staff here, hopefully sometime this week, to see if I can help them out with some film coordination stuff, just because I was doing it, super familiar with all the synergy editing stuff. So kind of see where that goes, and if it's something I can take on, throw on the resume.
Right. All righty, so we're going to get back to our conference previews. Jake and I believe, did 20 or so conferences in the last two episodes, and they were
Built different, boys. Built different.
Yeah, they were all the one bid mid majors. There's some we thought might get to, but it's probably outside shot at that. But now we're going to get into the multiple bid conferences, and today we're going to start off with Drew's favorite conference, the West Coast Conference. The realignment has hit them at least for once. Actually, it's going to hit them back-to-back seasons. This year, Oregon State and Washington State joined for one season, and then next year they'll be replaced, as those two teams I just mentioned will move back to the Pac-12 or whatever it's going to be called, and they will be replaced by two WAC teams that will join the West Coast Conference, and that will be Grand Canyon and Seattle. There were three coaching changes this year in the WCC, and they were not surprising, by the way, because the bottom of the conference was pretty bad last year. So Dave Smart replaces Leonard Perry at Pacific. Ed Schilling replaces Lorenzo Lomar at Pepperdine. That one was a little bit surprising because Lomar had been there for quite a while, has a good reputation. And lastly, Dave Riley replaced Kyle Smith at Washington State. Smith moved to Stanford. Riley comes in from Eastern Washington, and we'll talk about that more as we get down the conference. So, moving on, last year's St. Mary's was the regular season champ, but Gonzaga got the automatic bid for this conference, and by winning the conference tournament, they were the 5th seed. St. Mary's was also a 5th seed. Yes, Drew?
Gonzaga lost. St. Mary's was the auto.
Oh, were they?
St. Mary's 2 of 3. Yeah.
Thank you.
Begrudgingly, I have to admit, St. Mary's did take the auto.
That's right, because St. Mary's beat them pretty bad toward the end of the season at their place.
So Gonzaga handled them. So first game in Spokane, nail biter. Some officially, it was a close one. St. Mary's pulls it out. Second game in Moraga, Gonzaga put it on them, and then in the tournament, I think if I recall, 9 or 10 point win.
Right.
It was competitive, but they ended up pulling it out.
Right. So I had everything asked backwards there. And then Washington State, since they've joined the conference, it's worth mentioning they were a 7th seed as an at-large bid for the Pac-12. Last year, the awards, which I don't want to dwell on because we talked about them a lot at the end of last season, but Augustus Marshallonis won Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. This one I had a major problem with. Mitchell Saxon won for St. Mary's, and then Newcomer of the Year was Jonathan Mogbo from San Francisco. So at the top of the conference, we have Gonzaga. And Drew, I'm going to let you go with your team. And if Jake has any room to add anything, he may do so.
I'm sure you guys will have some good stuff to add. I'll try to take the rose-colored glasses off here. I mean, I think that last year's outcome, particularly in conference, did not sit well with them. Funny enough, I think overall it was a pretty successful season for them. I think they had 25-ish wins, made another Sweet 16. And despite a lot of those early kind of struggles, a lot of those losses came against San Diego State. They came against Purdue, UConn. I mean, they were losing games to pretty good teams. Outside of the upset that they had against Santa Clara midway through conference play and the loss at Washington, which they kind of choked away, there really weren't too many like questionable losses on the resume. Like losing to St. Mary's sucks as a fan, but in the world of basketball at the time, I think St. Mary's was kind of pushing in the 20s for the AP poll. So they absolutely reloaded. I think they had one of the best off seasons in the country. First and foremost on retention. I mean, in today's world, we're seeing guys jump ship despite playing 32 minutes a game and being the number one scoring option, and they're still packing it up and moving on. So, you lose Watson, who's kind of program legend, who kind of leave no matter what because of graduation, but you keep pretty much every other core piece. Unfortunately, Steel Venters blows his Achilles out after missing a full year with an ACL tear. So, it's just heartbreaking from the standpoint of, college basketball is better when it's, best players are playing. And I'm not saying that Steel Venters is, an All-American by any stretch, but this is a guy that was the Big Sky Player of the Year 2 years ago, beating out Dalton Connect, who we all love. So he was a perfect fit for the Gonzaga system. And, hopefully he can maintain some eligibility and, get back to the court. But you look at what they brought in, Michael Ajayi, they poached him from conference rival Pepperdine. And questions, how is he going to do when he plays those night in and night out tough opponents? But he looked really good at the NBA Combine. I think a big knock on this Zags team last year was outside of Watson, there were some NBA questions. There's not a lot of NBA guys on the roster. And even Watson was a borderline guy. I think Ajayi brings legitimate NBA upside. They bring in Battle from Arkansas. I know Jake and I talk this is a wild card. To me, he's the key. If this guy can replicate those last 7 or so games he had last year, and I'm not saying come off the bench and score, damn near 30 a night, but can come in and give them, 15 to 16, play his role perfectly, and he will earn spot starts. They will trot out, I think, a 3-guard lineup because Battle is that 6'5". He's got solid positional size. He's the X factor. If he hits the ground running and figures it out, this team is super dangerous. If we get kind of his last season in Temple Battle, which is a roller coaster to say the least, I still think it works because of the level of competition, but they don't need him for the WCC. They need him for March Madness. They need him for, the Maui Classic. I think they're in the battle for Atlantis this year. That's when they need him. So we'll see. And then they kind of bring in Emmanuel Innocente from Tarleton. Love the pickup. Super defensive-minded freshman, was an all-defensive and all-freshman team WAC player. I think brings, again, another level of athleticism and defense that this team just didn't really have outside of Anton Watson. And I think one of the biggest coups that, we're not going to talk about a lot this year, but it's Braden Smith, reigning Patriot League Player of the Year out of Colgate. He's coming back and he's redshirting this year. So I think that's kind of a big
At least
hit.
he'll start the season that way. I mean, could be a
Obviously.
scenario where they bring him off, especially with the injury eventers. Though I will say right now, the way the depth chart looks, they probably won't need him. But
absolutely, I think it's just a great insurance policy because I think he's kind of that. He's like a Ryan Nembhard clone. I think Nembhard is the better player, but if you have to plug and play another guy in the country to replace Nembhard, I think Smith is a pretty solid facsimile of that. And then the freshman that everyone's super excited about.
By the way, Player of the Year in his conference.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he was. Yeah, Patriot Player of the Year. And the guy that I think, again, I know I mentioned X factors, but I think who knows? But Ishmael Diangi, the freshman 4-star from Real Madrid, physically, he's something that Gonzaga probably hasn't really had in a long time. They had Chet as the long, lanky rim protector, but Diangi has a build on him. He's obviously going to grow and learn. It will be hard.
He's only 17.
Exactly. That's going to be the interesting thing. It's going to be hard for him to crack this rotation because he's automatically playing behind, I think, somebody that we all agree is going to contend for Player of the Year and potentially All-American status in Graham Ike. But Gonzaga's always had that knock of, hey, they can get a little soft. They need a little size. Rebounding, rim protection is always kind of a hit or miss with them.
He's probably the best rim protector on this roster. So
absolutely. So I know I can talk ad nauseum, but I think I didn't even talk about the returners. But look, if you go to the Sweet 16 in pretty convincing fashion, they are playing one of the best non-conference schedules that I can think of in a long time. I mean, you're talking Baylor, you're talking UConn, San Diego State, even though they're going to probably be a little bit down this year, but they're still playing them at their place, if I'm not mistaken. They'll continue the series with Kentucky, I believe. UCLA, we're looking at is to kind of be reloaded. That battle for Atlantis tournament has Arizona looming large. This team's going to be tested, and we'll get into conference. And I also think the WCC, at least in the top half, we might be looking at the best WCC we've seen since BYU was in there as kind of a three-bid team.
Before we move on to Jake, I wanted to ask you one question. What do you think about my projected starting lineup? Now, I know that this probably Mark Few and I think differently, but my lineup would be Nebhard, Battle, Ayayi, Greg, and Ike.
I have no problem with that. Nolan Hickman, for his first 2 years, I think Jake and I had this conversation going back. I had a lot of frustrations. They run a complicated offense, and I just felt like he couldn't pick it up. I have to give credit where it's due. He definitely improved a lot last year, both statistically and really took it upon himself. Like, he had to play major minutes, especially with, again, Venter's gone. I think that if they're going for the more, that's going to give them their best shot athletically and physically to compete with the best teams. Hickman, I think, would be a great second unit guy. I know Few does have a tendency to be loyal to his guys. So I will say, out of my experience with this team, Hickman will start. But I would not be shocked if we see 3-guard lineups with Nembhard, Hickman, and Battle on the court all at the same time, or Battle slotting in, because he gives them a dynamic that they haven't had in a long time in terms of a downhill attacker, kind of just pure bucket.
So you think the fifth guy is coming down to Battle and Greg?
I think he probably. I think Ben Gregg's an amazing Energizer Bunny type player. I think he was a great spark when they needed it last year, more for the emotional and mental stability, but for the pure basketball, I love Ben Gregg. I think every team in the country needs a Ben Gregg player who's going to dive on the floor, rebound, play hard. That, I think his ability is best captured in like those 20 to 22 minute spurts, because you go in and you're getting the purest of Ben Gregg for 22 minutes. He's giving you everything he's got. That can change the game. When you're asking him to play, potentially 30, some of the deficiencies, he's not like an elite defender. He's not like elite at anything, really, I think, kind of show up. But again, if Greg earns a starting nod because of the energy, I won't hate it. I don't think there's a starting lineup, with the exception of Dusty Stromer or Braden Huff being in there, that I wouldn't be okay with in some variation. I think they have at least Ike, Nembhard, Greg, Hickman, Ajayi, and Battle will all be fighting for starting minutes. And like I said, Braden Smith could end up in this rotation if anything happens, knock on wood. So I think they're deep. I think they're loaded. I think they're hungry. There is no freshman that will be playing. Every single guy in this rotation will have played at a minimum of probably 30-ish college games, if not more.
Right. Well, I think Jang is going to get some playing time, but
yeah, I think he'll be a situational guy. Like, they need 5 fouls and they need some physicality. I think he'll be in there, but we'll see.
Right. I'm going to make this statement. I think that whatever Gonzaga's second 5 is, might be able to win the West Coast Conference.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair. If you told me they trotted out Hickman, Stromer, Huff, and Greg, and some combination of a fifth man, like it should have been
Conte, yeah,
and Innocente, yeah. I think I totally agree.
Okay, Jake, we're gonna finally let you talk here.
No, it was all good stuff. Yeah, they're going to be very good again, and as Drew touched on, 9 straight Sweet 16s from Mark Field. 9. I don't think there's anybody in the country that's done that or even come close. You see a Kansas, get smacked by USC in the round of 32 one year. Duke is, even under Coach K, they lost a couple times in the first round. Like, they have been a model for consistency. And even with the rough stretch they had that Drew touched on in the non-conference, I mean, looking the way that they did, they lost to Santa Clara, they lost at home to St. Mary's, and then to go into Rupp and beat Kentucky. and then go on the run that they did to end the year. Although they lost to St. Mary's in the West Coast Championship, like they were very, very good to end the year and a dangerous team once they got into the tournament and were playing just as well as anybody going into the tournament, I would argue. So like everything that they have, they're going to be deep. They're going to have size. I think Ajayi is a really, really good pickup that Drew said with his NBA potential. I think is huge to be able to step in the Watson type role. It's a hard role to fill with a guy who's got a bunch of pro intangibles and was a very good player there for a long time. But yeah, I think the battle argument is interesting. I think he's going to light some teams in the bottom half of this conference. Like he's going to light some people up. He's going to have, I think, a couple 30-point games, whether he starts, whether they bring him off the bench and they just ride the hot hand because he's playing well. Like he's one of the best pure scorers in this conference, if not the best, in terms of just scoring and a bucket getter who can create for himself. And it's interesting because I think he could be very good starting because he's played in the Big East at Butler, even though he didn't play much there. And then he was in the AAC. He was in the SEC. Like he's played against some really good competition that this isn't going to phase him. I think you're going to get good minutes out of him here. I think Mark Few is going to be able to corral him a little bit because he does have some off the court issues at other stops, Temple being one of them. But even if you bring him off the bench and you just have him be a spark plug, I think it could be nice that he's not the guy that's asked to be doing all the scoring. He can just come off the bench and just be a spark plug, just be a scorer who can provide a lift off the bench. So I think this is a good spot for him, and I think the bench role really might not be, especially if he's going to be playing in a 25 to potentially 30-minute time frame anyway. It doesn't matter if he comes off the bench or not. If you're going to play that many minutes, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. So I think a bench role or start, I think either works for him, but I think a bench role isn't so bad for him either if he's just the Ben Gregg of like the guard, so to speak. You know what I mean? He brings his own energy and his own, like he can give you a lead or close a lead very fast with his scoring. So I think he's a wild card, as Drew said, but I think he can be a very good one, especially at this level. But look at all the returners. That's why they're going to win this conference. They have a very good transfer class coming in, but they're going to win it because of everybody they have coming back. You have another year of the Nolan Hickman, Ryan Nembhard backcourt. That Hickman was inconsistent at times, but Nembhard very, very good. As good as you'll see on the West Coast as far as point guards go. And then Graham Ike, like the last 7-8 games, you look at that St. Mary's loss on. I mean, this guy was dominant. This guy was nearly putting up 20 and 10. And it carried into the tournament. McNeese didn't have anybody big enough to guard him, and he feasted at a really good game there. So there's so much to like with Stromer now being there another year, and Huff and Greg. Like, there's just so much to like about this team. They're going to win this conference. I think they could actually run away with it with all that St. Mary's is leaving, and then with Mobo leaving from San Francisco. So, yeah, they're probably going to make another Sweet 16. They'll be very, very good once again. They'll be a dangerous team in the tournament, and they brought back a lot, and they brought in a very good transfer class as well. So much to like here.
Are we all in agreement Gonzaga's better than they were last year?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for them it was the first time in a long time that they didn't have any like stud carryover. Like, even though that team, they still had Strother and Timmy that they could like kind of plant their flag in. This was the first time we saw the best players on the team be new guys. And make no mistake, Mark Few, that bulldog motion offense is incredibly complicated. It's part of the reason Nembhard looked really bad the first probably 10 games of the season because he was having to learn to play on an entire new system, a system that will feed the post. Like at Creighton, Kalkbrenner is more of a in the flow of the game get his offense. And Gonzaga, you're feeding your bigs. Timmy is going to get touches. Ike is going to get go down the list of dominant 4s and 5s. So I think those guys now knowing this system are going to take off. They're super motivated. I really do believe that they were not happy about the St. Mary's kind of beating them. That's a big sticking point for this. For Gonzaga players, it's don't break the Sweet 16 streak. Don't be the team that drops that ball, and don't lose to St. Mary's. And they did one of those two things. So, I think this team is terrifying. They are a preseason top 10. I probably have them honestly, a little fandom-wise here, they're probably a top 6 or so team preseason. On paper, at least, even without Venters. If he was there, I don't think there's a weakness in this lineup that's glaring, at least.
Right. All right, so we'll move on to their rival St. Mary's, and they lost Aiden Mahaney to UConn, Joshua Jefferson to Iowa State. Now that loss, we saw St. Mary's really rolling for a long time, and then when Jefferson went down for the year, St. Mary's was kind of like not as dominant. One thing that helped them was another guy they lost to graduation, who's now playing in Australia. That's Alex Dukas, and he had some back issues that carried over from the season before. He was kind of lethargic at the beginning of the year, but he played better as the season went on. So those are three starters, three important starters, but they do return Augustus Marshallonis, Mitchell Saxon, the two guys we mentioned at the top. One's the player of the year, one's the defensive player of the year. They bring in a couple of nice transfers, and Paulus Markowskis. Am I saying that right?
Marushkis, I believe.
Marushkis, who was a highly touted European player out of Arizona. Arizona collects bigs, kind of like we used to collect baseball cards. They usually have like 5 or 6 on the roster, and then 3 of them transfer every year. And this is they had 3 transfer this year. Biggs it didn't really play at Arizona. He's one of them, and probably the most highly touted of the 3 that transferred. They also bring in Ashton Hardaway, Penny Hardaway's son from Memphis. They also had a nice recruiting class that included 2 4-stars, 1 3-star. The highest on the list is combo guard Mickey Lewis. In my opinion, St. Mary's is not going to be as good as last year. I'm not a huge Mahaney fan, but I was a huge Joshua Jefferson fan, and I just don't see this team quite being as strong as last year. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right with the loss to Jefferson. As big as it is to lose your point guard and your motor and Aiden Mahaney, like the Joshua Jefferson loss, I think you could argue is actually just as important, because you're right, when he got hurt, they really struggled. And I think that's a reason why they lost that second game against Gonzaga, was he was not in there, and he didn't have some size, some length, and some defense to go up against the Grand Mike and to go up against their other Watson and some of their other players. So his loss is massive. Now, I trust Randy Bennett, because what this guy's doing at St. Mary's is incredible, and that goes over his entire tenure. And I trust that the floor, like, for them will still be the number 2, and they'll still play Gonzaga close. Gus Marshallonis is great. Mitchell Saxon's great. I mean, to retain those 2 guys at least as 2 pillars on this team is really, really good. But the losses, I mean, they're clearly not going to be as good as they were last year, but I still think that they can be very good. I think Randy Bennett certainly has a floor with what he's done. So I still think they're number 2, as it usually commonplace is. You can you can set your watch to a Gonzaga St. Mary's for the most part top 2 at this point, and just kind of set it and forget it.
Right, but I mean, we're not just saying that because of history. I mean, you look at the talent that's here in this conference, and they do seem like the second best team.
Yeah, absolutely. But that loss of Josh Jefferson really, really hurts. I mean, with him in the lineup, they were so much better defensively with another big body in there that losing him is really
athleticism too.
Yeah, something that this team, historically does not really have.
Right, and that's why they slow it down and play at their own pace.
Yeah.
Drew, what are your thoughts on St. Mary's?
Yeah, I think Jake hit the nail on the head. I think, look, I'm a known Mahaney doubter. Maybe that goes back to his high school days when he gave my brother's high school team some work in the state tournament. So maybe I'm just still butthurt about that. But Joshua Jefferson is the engine that made this team go. He was outstanding on the road up in Spokane against the Zags. I think he had a 16 point, 11 rebound, double, shooting damn near 60%. He was awesome. They do not have, returning wise, they do not have a single athlete that strikes any fear, I think. Mikey Lewis is a really interesting prospect. He's not a traditional Randy Bennett guard, so it'll be interesting to see how much leeway does he have. Randy Bennett prefers his guards a lot more, I think, kind of safe floor, smart, cerebral players. Mikey Lewis is a little bit more of kind of a free-flowing combo guard, which is something that I do believe that they need. So I think he fits a need. It's just how much leeway will he have? I think Marciulionis is one of the most interesting players to talk about. I think there's an argument to be made that he might have been like the worst is relative, but probably one of the weaker like player of the year candidates in the country. I mean, he averaged like 12 and 5 last year, was really good, but pretty much across the board struggled anytime they played anybody that was a real tournament caliber team. I think Mitchell Saxton's a great big body, he knows his role, but he is a very, very traditional big. He is not going to shoot. He's a zero scoring threat off the block, zero scoring threat from the free throw line. Great big body, not a great mover. So I think kind of, again, an elite guy.
They do have a nice backup in Harry Wessels, but he too is not overly athletic.
Yeah, I've actually heard some fun. I have a lot of context. I've actually heard he is. They don't know why he doesn't get more burn. Apparently, he runs damn near a sub 5-minute mile.
Does he really?
Is what I've heard.
Metrically, if you look at the basketball, he's probably the best metric player on this team.
Yeah. No, I stand by that. They lost the Weber State game because they pulled him out, and for whatever reason, he got hurt late in the year. He never got back in rotation, but he's a 7'1", 7'2", thick-bodied Australian with a decent motor. But I think the guy I'm most excited, and this guy is the X factor, and I actually put him down as, we'll get into it, but a sleeper for Newcomer of the Year is Maruskis. I think we don't have a lot of NCAA film on him. He did not crack that Arizona rotation. He did play for Lithuania in their under-20 national and was dominant. Mm-hmm. He averaged like 18 and 10 and like a block and a half. He was a force. Now I know, a lot of times I had some people saying, oh, well, aren't all the best younger guys on like an Olympic year on another roster? But he was really, really good. A little 3-level scoring. The shooting isn't elite, but he is more skilled than Joshua Jefferson. He will not fill the Joshua Jefferson defensive void, which is the big question mark. But I think this guy has a pathway to be a 12-point per game, 6-rebound guy who cans,
I think he's going to be their leading scorer.
Yeah. No, yeah. He's going to be a very good piece for them. I think he is, as we said, for Battle, I think he's the X factor. If he comes in and gives them an offensive punch, because that's the thing. The question with this team is, can they get to 60 points a night consistently? And I think if he gets going, I think the answer is yes, and that makes them dangerous. So I agree with everything Jake said. We'll see. They're definitely not as good. Jordan Ross is interesting. Wessels it's a lot of interesting pieces. We're gonna find out. Is Marciulionis? This is gonna be the test. Is he the guy? Is he really the reigning WCC Player of the Year, or was that more of a, hey, you technically finished one game ahead of Gonzaga, so you were technically the best team, so we're giving to the best guy on the best team? We'll see.
I think another thing is, you lose Mahaney and Dukas, who probably their best trait was shooting. Yes. I don't think Ross and Lewis are going to bring that, but what they do bring is more athleticism.
Absolutely.
So, and that might be needed on a team that otherwise might struggle defensively against athleticism.
Yeah, they're going to need to manufacture easy points, and with their athleticism, those guys will get out on transition. They'll poke a pass. Like they won't generate the same half court offense, but they will be better at, on paper at least, they should be better at maybe getting out in transition, getting some easy buckets instead of having to run 24 seconds off the shot clock to end in a Saxon kind of post touch. So I think they're still number 2 on paper. I do think there are some teams that will challenge them. We are going to see, but you can't bet against Randy Bennett at this point.
Right. All right. So now we're going to talk about some other teams that I think could challenge, to get maybe a third bid in this conference. And for me, the top of that list would be topped by San Francisco, even losing Jonathan Mogbo. This team, other than that, and they also, of course, lost Mongolian Mike. But, his impact is, not huge. But so they do bring back the core of the team. Marcus Williams, the leading scorer. Guido Newberry was he's kind of their Antoine Watson. And Malik Thomas, a combo guard, a former USC player. Ryan Beasley was freshman of the year. And Junji Wang, or Barry Wang, whatever you want to call him, But what this team lacked last year, even with Mobo, because you got to remember Mobo's only like 6'7", and he was playing center. And I think what's going to be key to this team is, can the transfer from Texas San Antonio, Carlton Lingard, can he actually be a presence in the paint, both offensively and defensively? Because otherwise, they do have the guards who can shoot. They do have the guards that could create. But the question is, will they be able to stop anybody? And I think a lot of that's going to fall on Lingard. Also, Wang is another big in this body. And then they bring in freshman Tyrone Riley, who's a small forward, but still on this team, that most of its talent is like 6'3" and under. They need the bodies. So those are my thoughts on San Francisco. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, it is really funny to me that we're talking about a team that returns the conference's reigning freshman of the year, a first-team all-conference guard, and an all-conference honorable mention guy. And the guy that we're like, he has to work, is Lingard. On paper, he does everything they need. I think last year he was like an 8-point per game, 6.5 rebounds, block and a half, which if he can give them that, awesome. If he can't, I think Santa Clara is better than this team, without a doubt. I think that's what it boils down to. Guard play, you can argue, again, moving Gonzaga out of this situation, I believe they're on another tier. They have the best guards in the conference, at least in terms of they've played together. They were successful last year. Marcus Williams is a really fun player to watch. He's
he can create his own shot, so he's kind of like Battle in the sense of,
yes, you
need offense, he can give it to you.
He said at 6'3", you wish maybe if he had another 2 inches on him, you'd be really worried out of a problem for him. Like, he'd be really difficult to guard. But San Francisco has done this recently. They've had just a pretty good run of like kind of dynamic scoring guards. They had Khalil Shabazz, they had Jamari Bouye. He's right in line with those guys. Ryan Beasley, local kid, his brother's actually on the team. Really awesome flashes as a freshman, which is what you want to see. Had good games. I believe he played if I remember correctly, I think it was St. Mary's. I think he gave St. Mary's like a really good game. He had like 17 against St. Mary's at one point. I think he had 14 against Gonzaga. Again, the problem with him is he's like 6'1",
at best.
So it's like, is the book out on him, and can he continuously do it at a high level? We'll see. And then Thomas and Newberry are really solid. So it's weird to say that, again, a team that's returning some proven contributors, we're talking about a transfer from Texas San Antonio. Lingard has to be the guy, because if he's not, I don't think any of it matters, because they will have absolutely zero answer for a Mitchell Saxton. They'll have zero answer for a Graham Ike. And in college basketball, that's kind of a death knell. If they can just, that's what happened last year. Graham Ike just abused them in the Chase Center, and I think he went for 26, and the game was over before halftime.
Right. We sent our
there,
Zach.
And I should have been there, but I had work, and I still have not for that.
Zach traveled up from LA to attend that game.
But yeah, I think if it works, man, they do have the second best rotation of proven guards that can all score, can all play make a little bit, can all shoot a little bit. Like, they do everything you want from a college guard. They just happen to all be like 6'3" I think Thomas might be closer to like 6'4", 6'5", but he's not necessarily like an athlete or an elite like defender. He's really just a 40% 3-point shooter, kind of a bucket getter. So we'll see.
Jake, anything to add on Frisco?
No, you guys hit the nail on the head. But Ryan Beasley was really good at times last year. Like, he was really, really exciting at times, and I think he'll take another step forward as a sophomore. As much as, like, Drew, all fair points, is the book out on him? Is it, will the body catch up to him? Like, all very, very fair points. But guards are deep here. But yeah, big fella, Mr. Lingard's gonna have to step up, because that game at the Chase Center, was it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Was that a close game? I'm pretty sure that was.
Yeah, it was close at half. It was close at half.
It just ran wild on him.
I think they went on a 23-0 run to start. I'm not like a 20-something plus run to 0 to start the second half, and it was over.
Yeah, and I don't even think there was like foul trouble necessarily with Mobo. I think they were just missing every three that they put up, and Gonzaga just they went on a crazy run as they went on the grand run that they went on last year into the tournament. So I think they can be very good. Chris Gerlufsen, very good in the couple of years he's been there in Todd Golden's absence when he left for Florida. But yeah, so with the elite bigs at the top of this conference, if you can't defend them, you're not going to have a chance, because that's what Gonzaga does. They play the high low. They pound the ball inside. St. Mary's do the same thing with Mitchell Saxon. So guards are great. They're all very, very exciting, like foursome of guards forwards there. But you're going to need the big guy to step up if you want to have a chance. Because I do like what Drew said, that I think San Francisco, Santa Clara, I do think they're very close, and that Santa Clara could end up hopping them if that's not the case. The big guy doesn't work out.
Yeah. San Francisco will have no trouble scoring on people. It's just a question, will they be able to stop anybody? So, as Jake mentioned, Santa Clara is next on our list. They didn't lose anybody a huge contributor. I mean, Carlos Marshall was a really solid starter, and Francisco Cafaro was a nice big body to have in the middle, but they still bring back basically the core of last year, and that's led by Adama Alpha Ball, who actually may join us for this episode. I'm still trying to work out the details of that interview, but hopefully we get Adama on the show. To me, possibly the best pro prospect in this conference. He's certainly up there. And they also bring back Carlos Stewart, who spent 1 year in LSU. And he said, I don't like it here, which is good for him, because the year before, when he was at Santa Clara, he played 32 minutes per game, put up 15 points, shot 44 from the floor, 40 from deep, 83 from the line. So this is a guy who can put up 15, 20 points any given night. So basically, Carlos Marshall's a little bigger body, probably a better defender, but Stewart definitely brings you some more instant offense, and they have some big bodies. There's not a lot of depth on this team, same with Frisco, but they do have Johnny O'Neal, who's a nice big, the Christopher Tilley is a nice big, and Jacob Ensminger coming off the bench. He was a highly regarded prospect out of Germany a couple years ago. So, Jake, what you and Drew both seem, I don't know if I'm reading it right, but I think you both might like Santa Clara a little better than Frisco.
Well, they certainly have the size.
Yeah.
They certainly have they don't have the questions that we do about San Francisco, and bringing back Carlos Stewart. Like, you have a very nice 1-2 punch here with the Dama Alpha Ball and then Carlos Stewart as well. So a nice 1-2 punch at the guard spot and some size. I guess you could say maybe the floor is a little bit higher, I guess, for Santa Clara as opposed to San Francisco. That, like, well, it could blow up in San Francisco's face if the big doesn't work out for them. Like, I don't think we're going to run into these issues at all with Santa Clara. So I think it might be a bit more of a boom or bust for San Francisco, that they could be above, because they're going to need the guards to carry them. But I think the floor here with Santa Clara, you're not going to have those same issues. So I think Santa Clara, like, a very good 1-2 guard. I think I'm talking myself into Santa Clara as I'm saying this, by the way. I think I'm like I think this is basically me saying that I would put them above San Francisco. Like, floor is a little bit higher. You bring back Carlos Stewart, who can play here and can play in this conference. Really good 1-2 punch at guard, and a bunch of bigs. Depth is the question, though.
And Johnny O'Neal is a nice. He's not a prolific shot blocker or anything like that, but he's a solid all around player. Can do a little bit of everything. And Brian can score. Therese Bryan at shooting guard. My one question, Drew, is there's no real true point guard on this team.
Yeah. So I'll come out. I like Santa Clara better than USF. Not so wildly. Like, I think it's more of a safe floor again versus kind of like the upside. But I saw this team and all these guys play like live courtside in a game. Granted, they were playing in NAIA school, so they also hit, I think, a record number of threes in a single game at that time.
I saw a young coach on the sideline of the NAIA school on TV, and he was dapperly dressed, very handsome, but he seemed clueless when it came to X's and O's.
Oh, man. That's why that guy's not there anymore. They had one after that game. They were like, get him out of there. But no, yeah, I think the point guard will be interesting. I mean, last year, I'm drawing a blank on his first name. It was Benjamin, their point guard, small, very speedy player. wasn't really a traditional point guard either. Is actually kind of more of a disturber and a disruptor. Is Benjamin something? I'm drawing a blank on his full name. I think that will be the question, but I think Adama Ball is like a dark horse candidate to be player of the year in this conference. I think he has the physical.
Brenton Napper?
No, I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Oh, Jalen Benjamin.
Jalen Benjamin. He like started, didn't start. He was kind of a loose cannon. He had spent some time. He had been all over the place, but he was at least quick enough with the ball in his hands to do a lot. He was really more of just a dribble, penetrate, and kick out kind of guy. But I think Ball is kind of the dark horse for me for player of the year. I know everyone's going to look at Gonzaga. Everyone's going to look at Graham Ike and probably 2 or 3 more Zags before they start looking elsewhere. I think he has all the intangibles and is going to be looked upon. And like, if he produces the way everybody expects him to, I think they are for sure better than USF, because I don't think USF has anybody like that with that athleticism, that size, that skill. Johnny O'Neal, stretch 4, 6'10", the shot looks better than the stats say, so he's got to kind of put that together. Ensminger is kind of, again, another utility forward. I mean, he was a freshman last year. He was an all-conference freshman, like on the freshman team. I really like his game. Does he have more in the bag as a scorer? We'll see. A lot of his offense was kind of just like putbacks and within the flow of the game, but there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if he's going to be the 4th or 5th option and he's just going to be a cutter, teeing stuff up, hey, that totally works. He did average, I think, close to 5 or 6 rebounds, I think, as a freshman, if I'm not mistaken. And then one thing that nobody's really talking about, and it's not going to make the national lines. So obviously, Stewart coming back is a big deal. They are bringing in a guy that I've seen live. My dad, who is obviously coaching at the D2 ranks now, has seen Elijah Mahi, I believe, or Mahi is, I think I pronounced his last name. He's, I believe, a 6'6" JUCO transfer from the CCC AA, which is like the top like California JUCO scene. He led his team, West Valley, to a 33-0 record, state championship, averaged 17.5 points, 6.6 boards, and 4.5 assists, shooting 50+% from the field. We got to see him do it at the D1 level, right? That's the question. But
Right.
This guy has Michael Ajayi kind of written all over him. Ajayi was a 2-year JUCO guy, came to Pepperdine and dominated. He won't do the same numbers because he's not going to a team where he's the best guy. But this kid is talented. He's kind of got that dog JUCO mentality. He is a D1 athlete and had D1 numbers. So even if he's an 8.4 rebound, 2 assist guy, I think this guy is not going to be talked a lot about because, he's not coming from another D1. Stewart is back and he's like the big story of the homecoming. But this kid could give them some serious depth at that like 3-4 position. I don't know too much on his shooting. I haven't tracked that. But the raw box score and the athleticism from what I've seen does track. And I mean, again, 33-0 in a very competitive JUCO scene in California is not to be, laughed at. We're, a lot of good JUCO guys have played. He's in the same conference as guys like Norman, who ended up at Santa Barbara, Darion Trammell, who ended up being that starting point guard in San Diego State, all came from that conference. So
Right.
There's an outline for this kid to be a factor to some degree, for sure.
Okay. We'll move on to Loyola Marymount, and they're probably going to finish in the middle, but I think they have a chance because they get 2 bucket getters. And Javon Porter, who's Michael Porter's younger brother, and MJ Amy, a transfer from San Jose State, who I believe averaged over 15 points a game last year. Yeah, I'll just take a quick look. Yes, he averaged close to 16 last year, shooting 43 from the floor, 36 from deep, 79 from the line. Also brought in 5 rebounds a game, 3 assists, 1.6 steals. Of course, that was at San Jose State in the Mountain West. So it's you could argue that he's actually in an easier conference this year. So they also bring in Jean Vide from UCLA, a big combo guard who hardly got to play last year, but was a very touted prospect coming out of Europe. And I don't know how to say, do you know how to say Alex's last name? But he had a solid year. He's one of the returners. Alex
Deze or something. I don't know how to. I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, but he's probably, him and Will Johnston are the two solid returners coming on, with this team. The one thing I see is, again, you get some bucket getters, Porter's like 6'11", but, he has center size, but he really plays like Michael. More so, though I'd say he takes more mid-range shots. He's not like a solid marksman like Michael is right now. But the thing of it is, he's probably their biggest player on the team or second biggest player on the team, but he's not a center. And he doesn't really block a lot of shots. Just think of Michael Porter. You wouldn't want him at the 5. So they really don't have a lot of talent at center, very similar to San Francisco. Yeah. So Jake, what do you think about this Loyola Marymount team?
Yeah, there's just so many losses here, and even with the guys they're bringing back, like losing Juice Hill at the point guard spot, losing Dominic Harris, and then Pepe was one of the most electric players in college basketball the last couple of years with his hair and watching him play. So with everything they lose, Will Johnston was actually a Temple target last year for Adam Fisher, a guy who could really stroke it from deep. I mean, he would have fit right into Temple, but yeah, to retain a shooter like him is huge. But yeah, it feels like we're running into the same San Francisco question here, because the thing is, like, you want to be top of the conference, well, you got to go up against Gonzaga and St. Mary's, and we could just probably use, it's almost like rinse repeat for every team. You want to be good, got to go up against those two guys. If you don't have the centers and the bodies to do it, well, you're not going to be in that top 2, and you're going to be farther down the standing. So a lot of losses here that turns me off a little bit. Been a good program in this conference the last handful of seasons, but to me, they can't crack that top 4. I think that the top 4 is like kind of set, if you will, in the conference. I think there's 4 teams I really like in Santa Clara, San Francisco, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and then we start to hit the second, like, not tier, because Gonzaga, St. Mary's in a league of their own, but yeah, I don't think Loyola Marymount, with all the losses they have, can crack this top 4, and then with size questions as well.
Yeah, really, they really only have 5 players that we know are probably going to be good. Two could be all conference players, but after that, it's like, who they got, Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, this team is the classic WCC team that on any given night, like, they could give Gonzaga a game. I won't take them to beat them. They could even sneak up and get at St. Mary's if St. Mary's just had one of those kind of traditional St. Mary's sluggish games and Porter goes for 20 and gets hot. I really do like MJ from San Jose State. He's a do-it-all kind of guy. I think I went back and forth on him and somebody from Washington State, which we'll get into as newcomer of the year. And honestly, just to be a little bit different, I went with the other direction. But I think he's going to be really good. But you can't go against those 2 teams. Honestly, those 4 teams, they're deeper, they're bigger. And in a lot of cases, they're just better. So, if you're banking on to contend with those guys, Porter and him may have to stay healthy. Porter was hurt last year. I think he missed the first 12 games of the season. So, I'm not projecting injury for him. By all accounts, he's healthy. But, like, you're an injury.
Pepe was hurt a lot. Actually, toward the opposite end. He missed the end of the year.
He's the biggest loss because of his physicality. And like Jake said, like, his energy and his physicality. I watched him, but this guy was definitely a few screws loose. He's like slapping the floor, coming out at halftime, like punching the padding under the basket. But like, you need that to compete with those top teams, because if you don't believe you can, and then the physical, that is a big boy. The physicality is a huge. He's the biggest loss.
He got signed right away in the Australian League.
He's gonna fit right in.
Yeah, I know. He's probably playing for Tasmania.
Yeah, he's literally halftime entertainment. Have him go out there and like box a kangaroo, man. I'd pay to see it. No, yeah, they will definitely pick. I can call it now. LMU will knock off, like, they'll get Santa Clara at their place, or they'll get USF at their place, because Porter goes for 20 plus. May has a kind of one of those do it all, 15, 5 and 5 games, but consistently night in and night out, they're going to be so beholden to, I think, like, foul trouble and health and just consistent play from guys that are, good, and we'll see how consistent they can be across the board, that I think they are in that tier, like that Washington State LMU tier, where I think it's like that second grouping where if it all goes right, maybe they sneak in, but I feel more comfortable in that like 5 to 6 range for them.
Right. And another team, at least I expect to be kind of in the middle of the pack, has gone through the strangest transition you'll ever see. And that's Washington State being replaced by Eastern Washington's coach, which I mentioned at the top of the show. And everybody who was anybody for Washington State last year pretty much left either to the pros, their top three players, two of their top three players, Jalen Wells and Isaac Jones, went to the pros. Miles Rice transferred to Indiana, but everybody else went to a different school. The only significant holdover was Isaiah Watts, who was a seldom used freshman, but he did well when he played. And then basically everybody from who played for Eastern Washington last year, who won the regular season in the Big Sky, is now on Washington State, including Cedric Coward, who was an all-conference player we had on the show. But they also bring in LeJean Watts, is probably their second best player, and he's only a sophomore. And you can go on down the line. Basically, anybody who was anybody for Eastern Washington last year is now on this team. So basically, what do we think the regular season champs of the Big Sky will do this year in the West Coast Conference? What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, this is really quite the transition to go from a Power 5 conference where you have Kyle Smith, who just all he does is take over tough jobs and win kind of quickly. And now they're in the WCC, and everybody leaves, and Kyle Smith leaves. And then a guy in the same state comes in and takes over. And all those guys that played for him in that very state are now playing for him. It's really quite the conundrum, what went on with them. So they're not going to be nearly as good as they were last year. And it's a weird spot to catch Washington State in. And I think they'll be a victim of circumstance with everything that has happened. But I do think that Riley is a good coach, and this is a logical next step for him, and it was a good hire. And who knows what will happen with Washington State potentially going back to the Pac-12 when that happens. We'll probably need another episode to talk about conference realignment, all that other stuff that's going on. But I think they can be right in the middle of the pack. Like, you have a guy with potential NBA upside here in Cedric Coward who can do a whole lot of everything.
Yeah.
And then you bring in the rest of that Eastern Washington team that was very good in their conference. And again, they win the regular season for the second year in a row. And then they just couldn't pull it out in the Big Sky tournament, where Montana State wins again, even with Danny Sprinkle leaving. So
the fifth seed. So four teams were at the top of that conference and were fighting for first place, and none of them made it. Fifth seed Montana State.
Yeah, naturally, who had just made it the last 2 years. So I think they'll be solid. I think they'll be right in the middle here. I mean, I know that the Big Sky is not the WCC, but I think that they work good enough that they can at least be competitive here. Because I think the bottom of the conference with new hires, we're going to talk about Oregon State coming in, who also was gutted with guys that are like, hey, like, I was in a Power 5 conference a couple months ago. I don't want to play in the WCC. Like, I can go on and play at other places. So these two teams were gutted. It's a very weird set of circumstances for them. But I do think that Dave Riley and his Eastern Washington guys they already have the gel and the camaraderie together. I think they can be competitive here. Just such a weird turn of events.
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you what, though, the Big Sky's rooting for Washington State.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
basically
seriously.
are the Big Sky.
Yeah, because this basically is a Big Sky team. So if they would actually make the tournament or something, I think the Big Sky, it would be a selling point for them. Not for long, but at least for a year. Drew, you have anything to add about Washington State?
Not really. I think the biggest advantage this team's going to have is just continuity under just a different manner. Like, that's the one thing I think that, like, when you compare them to, say, like a LMU, like, this is Eastern Washington just with damn near the same color scheme almost. And, like, they got red in the jersey still, more or less. So that's going to be the saving grace. I think they can compete. They haven't faced like a St. Mary's and a Gonzaga before, like, consistently before. Like, you go back and look at their schedule last year, like, they were not good for the most part against, like, the Power 5 teams. That they were actually pretty horrible. They got smacked by Utah. They lost to Stanford pretty badly. They got destroyed by Southern California USC, and we know what that disaster was like. So good at their level, we're gonna see. Like, I think this is gonna be one of those teams where early on, I think people might be kind of like, oh, they look pretty good. And again, it's because it's the same guys, the same coach, and they have the base stat lines look nice, but then they're gonna run up against the Gonzaga team, or they're gonna get those 60 minutes in hell with St. Mary's, and it's gonna get ugly kind of quick, I think. And we'll realize like, oh, okay, yeah, you fit here, you belong in this tier. But I can't blame a coach for bringing his guys. It's kind of the norm, right? If you're going to take a new job, I mean, that's what Sprinkle did with Utah State, right? He takes a job at Washington. First thing he does is get great Osobor, that massive NIL deal, and he's going to figure it out from there. So 6, I think, is 6 and 5 is their ceiling. If it works to its absolute peak, I think they're the 5th best team. If it doesn't, they could be even a little bit lower.
Right. And the other former Pac-12 team, or actually not former, they're still a Pac-12 team, but playing in the WCC this year, is Oregon State. They weren't very good last year, and they lose their top 2 players. Jordan Pope, the combo guard, goes to Texas, and Tyler Bilodeau goes to UCLA. That's a killer for a team that didn't have a lot of talent to begin with. They do bring back Michael Rattay, who's kind of a what's the word I want? Blue collar guy. They bring in Tyler Cochran, the reigning defensive player of the year from the MAC, played for Toledo for 4 years. And then pretty much the rest of the roster is either guys that didn't play a ton last year, or transfers that really didn't get a chance, or they're coming from smaller schools. I don't see a lot of hope here. What do you think, Drew?
I think that this is where the conference kind of takes a pretty bad tumble. They lose their 3 high major top scorers are gone. And I think Jake Slater, I think these guys were kind of looking going, they've been since that whatever deal they made with the Devil for that Elite 8 run back in 21 is come due, because they have been horrendous the last couple of years. And It's not like the Pac-12 for basketball has been a super big hotbed of competition. Most of those teams,
that's with the Thompson brothers and
exactly.
Who was the shooting guard? He was kind of like a Gordon Hayward type of player.
He was playing with the Warriors in summer league. I think
Is it Tinkle?
Yeah, it was Trace Tinkle.
Yeah.
It was Coach's son.
They did Jared Lucas once upon a time.
That's right. They did.
Yeah.
He
was on that team. He was on that team.
Yeah.
But I won't. We have other teams to cover. I think they bring in 4 guys who were good at the level that they were at, but there's a reason they were at that level. And I understand you got to get help. Tyler Cochran's, I think, going to be their best player probably. I think he's going to contend. I think Richie might have had it in there, but I think he's going to contend for some defensive honors. He plays with a fire and intensity, and they're going to need that. But this is going to become a skill issue very quickly. They are just not good enough to compete with these other teams, point blank.
Right. Anything to add, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, Drew's absolutely right. I mean, how about they followed up the Elite 8 year going 3-28 after everybody had left? Like, they just haven't been good under Wayne Tinkle, and then they moved down in conference, and because of that, everybody leaves. They lose Dexter Cano as well, as going to be playing in the next conference we're going to talk about. So there's just not a lot here. They were gutted by their best players, and the guys they're bringing in just don't have that talent and that production level that can even, kind of close match what they're losing. So a drop down in talent and a drop down in conference, and Wayne Tinkle just hasn't been very good since that run that they made. And quite frankly, until they made that run, they weren't very good either.
Right.
So yeah, I don't see a lot of hope for them, and they're really just above the teams that were gutted by graduation, the portal, and new hires. I don't see a lot of upside for them at all.
Yeah, I don't see any scoring punch on this team. They're going to have to play like St. Mary's in the 50s. That's how they're going to have to win. They do have some size and they do have some grit, but yeah, I don't think they're going to be fun to watch. So now we're going to move on to Pacific, who arguably at the end of the year last year was the worst team in Division I. I mean, this team was horrific, and we're not talking about them finishing in last place. At least I'm thinking they're not going to finish in last
I
place.
agree. I agree.
And the reason is, to me, they bring in 3 really nice transfers, 3 guys that were basically 4-star recruits. Eliza Fisher from DePaul, Lamar Washington from Texas Tech, and Jazz Gardner from Nevada. They bring in a couple other guys from smaller schools. They don't have much returning, but that's just as good. That's just fine, because last year's group was terrible. Though Mo Odom and Tyler Beard are 2 guys that I kind of like, and they transferred to other schools. So, Drew, you and I sometimes would just like scratch our heads when we would see some of these specific scores come in. Do they finish in last place, or does
I don't think they finished in last place. I actually did my WCC like personal rankings, and as we were prepping for the show and just going through, and I was like, wow, oh my god, I had Pacific not last, but not even second to last, which does not speak volumes to this bottom like 4 team. Fisher, productive, but on another really bad DePaul team. So
right?
is it going to be more of the same? Is he going to be somewhat productive, but in a kind of a meaningless way? I think Lamar Washington and Jazz Gardner are the 2 bigger stories here. Gardner brings them that size that we've been talking about the whole show about, like, we didn't really see him do much. He didn't really get a chance to do a lot with, Nevada, but with his size in this conference, I can see him just kind of willing his way to some productivity, because there's just not a lot of teams that can deploy guys that can match him physically, size-wise, and whatnot. And then Lamar Washington, I mean, he's a Texas Tech caliber athlete, so that should help carry him. Again, didn't really crack the rotation in a meaningful way. So it's going to be interesting, because it's, for those 2 in particular, this is a very fresh start for them. And I expect both of them to be pretty impactful. I don't know how, to be honest, I don't know how much worse you can be as a team. Like, I seriously, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they were losing. What was that one game?
They lost to St. Mary's. They scored 45 points against St. Mary's or something like that. It might have been
No, it was in the 30s, wasn't it?
No, yeah, actually, it might have been like 28. I think
I don't know if they broke 30.
They had it was like what, 56-6 at one point in the first half.
Yeah,
it was
they only scored like 28
first
points.
round.
Yeah, it was disgusting. So
I don't think that's happening this year.
No, I think those guys alone just give them enough of a lift in terms of just, again, like athleticism. You have a guy who has proven that at the D1 level, he can put up 10+ points a game. We didn't talk about Mo Odom. He's actually over at Pepperdine now, which I think is a nice little pickup for them as a playmaker. He did average almost 5 assists a game. So just throwing it back to Pepperdine really quick. But again, look, I have very little expectations for this team, because I don't know what to expect. Lamar Washington and Jazz Gardner we're talking about might be their 2 best players, and they didn't really play last year. So I don't really know what to expect from this team. I just know that I don't think it can get much worse.
Right. Jake?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Jazz Gardner just got stuck behind a really good defensive unit at Nevada that had KJ Himes when he was healthy enough to be in there, and behind Nick Davidson as well. Like, they had 2 bigs that they really liked. That Davidson will emerge again this year, emerged last year, and then Himes, when he was healthy, one of the best shot blockers in the Mountain West. So I think Jazz Gardner's a good piece here to be able to play a lot and produce. Lamar Washington, like, as a guy who's moving down quite a bit from the Big 12 to the WCC, I think it'd be a nice piece as well. But it can't get worse than being down 50 points in the first half in the WCC tournament. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at that point Romar had been fired. Or am I talking about the wrong?
Yeah, Romar's at Pepperdine.
I always get him confused. Oh my god.
Yeah, no, yeah. Who was
But I think the coach had been fired by that point.
Yeah,
like by the time that game had been played, like the season just felt like it was kind of being mailed in anyway. Coach had been let go, they weren't playing well, and then they get demolished like they did. So it'll take a while to build a place like this, but there is a couple nice pieces here that they certainly won't be as bad as they were last year.
Another really bad team last year was Portland, though they had some bright spots. I think this team had a lot of injury issues last year. But they lost Tyler Robinson, their best player, to the pros. Tyler Harris was a really promising freshman who transferred to Washington. So they bring back one player that, a solid player in Vukasin Misic, if I'm saying that right. a combo guard who did a nice job last year, but I'm not too excited about what Portland, has to put out on the floor this year. Though I will say they got two guys, two top 170 players, and I'm not really familiar with these guys. Todd Jones, a power forward, and Jinup Dubal, a small forward. Like I said, both of those guys are top 170 guys, so borderline 3-star, 4-star. So it looks like Portland's moving in the right direction, but basically they lost their two best players, and they were really bad already. Anything to add, anyone?
Nope.
This job is like damn near impossible.
Yeah.
Should it
And
be?
no, I
though?
think Shante Legans is really good, but like this is a really hard job.
Why though?
It just always has been. Like when he took, how bad were they when he took over? You remember that they had like a crazy conference losing streak or
Oh yeah,
something.
they were basically that Pacific team damn near every year for like a stretch. Maybe a little bit better, but they were terrible for like a very long stretch.
Yeah, and then he ended up like winning a couple conference games, and like I think Shante Legans is really good, but you know what I mean? Like when he started doing that, it was like, oh my God, like this hasn't been done here before because they've been this bad. So this is just a tough job, and to get gutted by the portal. And Tyler Robertson, correct me if I'm wrong, was he a 6-year guy?
I believe so.
Probably.
I think he was a 6-year guy as well. Like to lose a guy that's been there that long, and their best player as well. Like
Yeah, and Tyler Harris was their best pro prospect.
That kid could play too.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so now we move on
job.
to Steve Lavin at San Diego. That shouldn't be a hard job. But Steve Lavin basically lost 4 of his 5 best players.
In my opinion.
Probably the most intriguing guy he brings back is a European guy who was highly touted, and Dragos Lungu. What?
It's Dragos Lungu.
Dragos Lungu. But didn't meet expectations last year. But the cupboard looks really bare, and the only transfer of note in my book is wing Cody Collette, a D2 transfer from Southeastern Oklahoma. Put up huge numbers at D2 level, but I don't think he's going to move the needle that much for San Diego. So I don't see a lot of. I'm really surprised here.
I'm very, very. I don't really know what the game plan was, but to get gutted by the portal. Look, I understand a lot of that's out of a coach's hand, especially at this level, right? Those were his 4 best players. I'm sure they had suitors elsewhere. No different than Pepperdine losing their guys. Romar leaves, and those guys all transfer. Like 2 of them, Mallet and Ajayi, end up at like legitimate programs, and Porter follows them. I understand that, but it feels like it almost feels like they didn't even try. Like they just said, we're not going to touch the portal. We're just going to roll. I mean, their best player coming back is Steven Jamerson II, who was their center, and he wasn't even necessarily a starter. He did put up like the raw numbers when he did play. I don't think he was healthy for a chunk of the year. It was like 8 and 1 block a game. But I'm like, that ain't cutting it in the W. If that's your best returning player, that ain't going to cut it.
Well, I think Lungo is probably their best returning player, but you can't prove that by looking at last year's numbers.
So you're saying your best guy is a guy who didn't do it last year, and then the guy who did do it last year didn't do anything special. So I'm just kind of really shocked that they didn't. Their best offseason move was bringing in what's his name from the Suns as an assistant coach.
Right.
Earl
Watson.
Earl Watson's, and that's like literally was their best move. And so I don't know if this was them just saying, look, we're going full rebuild. We're just going to let this year tank and then really hit the recruiting and, portal hard next year. I don't know, but this was actually kind of sad to see a team feel like give up after an 18-win season. Like they won 18 last year, and it feels like they just kind of accepted that our guys left. What are we going to do? Palms to the sky.
Yeah. And the funny part is there's still, a handful of players out there that could start for them that's still in the portal. Like Kenyon Minifield, who started some last year for Arkansas. I think he's still out there. I don't know unless he's hurt or gotten some trouble with the law or something. But Minifield would probably be the star in this team.
Yeah, there's just so much scoring that's lost, and it's got to be painful that 3 guys stay in Southern California to leave and go to other programs. But
Right.
I mean, another thing is like, look, correct me if I'm wrong. This is a relatively new program to Division One, UC San Diego. Who knows what they
No,
have
they're
as
not
far as
UC
like,
San Diego. UC
excuse
San
me, San
Diego's
Diego. Yes,
yeah.
apologies, got them
UC San
confused.
Diego's the school in the Big West.
Yeah, but they're relatively new to D1. Who knows how much they have as far as, and I mean, it's a totally new era that we're in. That's like small teams like this in a small conference. It's like, I know, like you can easily see, like, oh, like they should have brought in more. They're losing so much, but like, how plausible is that in the era of NIL and everything? And like, well, are they the right fit for our roster? You know what I mean? I feel like there's a lot that plays into it, that there's just so much going on now that maybe they couldn't provide. I mean, surely the playing time and the usage is there with all the guys leaving, but
Here's what's gonna blow our minds when we get to the huge conferences, the mega conferences. We're gonna see guys on that are second and third stringers on those teams, like Kentucky and UCLA and Illinois, and that could play. It could be a star on this team, and you got to say to yourself, are these kids just doing it? I asked, I'm drawing a blank, Northern Colorado's coach, Steve Smiley. I asked Coach Smiley, I said, why do kids do this? And he's like, I don't know. And I said, it seems to me that it's more important to collect a paycheck and sit on the bench than it is to actually play basketball and actually, work on becoming a star and becoming possibly a pro prospect. And he said that might be just the case.
yeah. And I mean, people that are only a couple years removed from high school, maybe they're a freshman in a small conference, they blow up and then they move up. Like, think about that. Like, you were very lightly recruited. You're in a small conference. You play very well, and now you have people potentially throwing 6 figures at you at a big school where you could potentially make even more doing sponsorships
Well,
and stuff
Jake,
like
what
that.
I'm saying is when we get to the depth charts of these teams, there's no way some of these kids are going to get off the bench.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I think that's what the whole NIL machine is doing here to some people in these small conferences. So, look, bottom line is with San Diego, they're losing so much scoring. PJ Hayes was a guy that I think St. Joe's was actually in on a little bit to try and get another shooter in off the bench.
Right.
He ends up going to Rutgers. A lot of these guys move up, testament to what Steve Lavin and the staff has done, bringing in good players.
McKinney's probably going to be the starting point guard for the Aztecs in the Mountain West.
Yeah, 100%. So
and Kevin Patton, speaking of defensive player of the year, should have been in the running for defensive player of the year in this conference. Probably way better defender than Mitchell Saxon. He's going to USC.
Yeah, but there's shooting with PJ Hayes and a point guard and Wayne McKinney and more scoring with Deuce Turner and defense with Kevin Patton. Like, I don't see any upside with them because there's just no replacements for what they lost.
Yeah. Right. And we'll move on to Pepperdine, who did lose Lorenzo Lomar. I've always liked Lorenzo, going back to his days at Washington. The only significant player of note is Boubacar Coulibaly, a center who really wasn't even he was like a 20-25 minute guy. They lose Javante Porter, who we mentioned, to Loyola Marymount. Michael Ajayi goes to Gonzaga, and Houston Millett goes to Alabama, and on and on. And basically what they're going to be playing with is a bunch of transfers. The most accomplished is, Drew mentioned, Mo Odom, a really good playmaker from Pacific, and the rest, like Aaron Clark and Steven Todorovich, these are guys that were pretty high recruits, probably 4 stars, that didn't do it at their other schools, and they're hoping to do it with Pepperdine. Javon Cooley was a solid player for Marist. Pretty big jump up, I think, here for him, but any shot here? I mean, maybe in some respects, I talked about San Diego basically because of Steve Lavin before Pepperdine, but my gut says this team's probably better than San Diego.
I've got Pepperdine above San Diego. I just think that Pepperdine tried. Like, I would take Coulibaly and Mo Odom over anybody on San Diego. I would. If I needed two guys, I'm taking those two guys. And so I'll just boil it down to, if you have two guys I like more than anybody you have, I think that makes, at this, when they're both so low, I think that's the X factor. Again, we're talking about teams here that are going to be cakewalked.
Oh yeah, they're going to be bad. They're going to be
But,
bad.
I would take Pepperdine slightly over. I think San Diego has the only edge is, they retain a coach. So you have new coach, not a lot of holdovers, older coach, but completely new roster. Well, not completely, but a pretty unreinforced roster. We'll see how it shakes out, but I'll lean Pepperdine ever so slightly.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, so now we'll do our WCC predictions here. We're all going with Gonzaga to win it. As far as other bids, Drew says St. Mary's. He says Santa Clara is a sleeper. Jake says St. Mary's, also like Santa Clara. I said St. Mary's in a possible third bid from San Francisco, Santa Clara, or Loyola Marymount. I doubt they'll get three bids, but yeah, so pretty much we're all going Gonzaga, St. Mary's. We all like Graham Ike to win Player of the Year. We all like Tyler Cochran to win Defensive Player of the Year. I like MJ. Is it Amy? I think it's Amy, isn't it?
Amy. Yeah.
From Loyola Marymount to win a Newcomer of the Year, and Jake and Drew both like Cedric Coward. You also threw Morauskas.
I threw him in as a sleeper. I just think if this year, I think it's going to be if he's bad, they're not going to be great. If he's good, I think they're going to be good. And I think Coward's just going to have that green light. He's playing with his old coach. He's familiar.
And he's a stat sheet stuffer. He does a little bit of everything. Good athlete. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to move on to Jake's conference, the Mountain West. No realignment going on here. 3 coaching changes. Utah State had their annual coaching change. How many years in a row, Jake, has Utah State had a new head coach?
Well, this will be going on the third year, and Odom was only there for 2 years.
Yep.
So, but I mean, here's the thing. If history tells us anything, this is probably going to be a really, really good hire with Jared Calhoun, because the 3 others have been very good and moved on to other jobs and been successful there. So, I think Utah's a tough job now in the freaking Big 12 of all schools. But bottom line being, like, Craig Smith, Ryan Odom, Danny Sprinkle, they had a lot of success here, and they went on to other jobs where Ryan Odom was successful in year 1. Danny Sprinkle, we'll see. But if history tells us anything, Utah State can't miss. This is probably a really good hire with Jared Calhoun.
Jeff Linder resigned at Wyoming, and your boy Sundance Wicks takes over at Wyoming, and Vance Wahlberg takes over at Fresno State for the fired Justin Hudson. So what else is going on with this conference? So last year, the automatic bid went to New Mexico. It was basically a 6-team race all year, very close. You really couldn't, one night to the next, you really didn't know who was they were all so close. But New Mexico won the conference tourney. The regular season champ, though, was Utah State. The player of the year was Jaden Ledee. And I don't have who was the defensive player of the year or rookie of the year. So let me look them up quickly. I don't know how I skipped that over. Of course, Isaiah Stevens could have been I
thought Osobor was player of the year.
No, it was Ledee.
Was it?
Yeah.
Could have sworn. Okay, yeah. I mean,
wait, you are right.
I thought it was Oceanborn.
Ledee got all the All-American nominations, but the West Coast Player of the Year was great. He actually have split. The coaches voted for Great Osobor, and the media picked Ledee. Good call. Okay. Good call. Now I'm looking for. My goodness, they give out a lot of awards in the Mountain West. I don't see. Defensive Player of the Year was Lamont Butler. And the Newcomer of the Year, Freshman of the Year, was a tie between J.T. Toppin and Dayton Thomas of UNLV.
I know Emzil was a 6th candidate.
Newcomer of the year was Ozabor, in both media and coaches. So freshman of the year, the coaches split between Thomas of UNLV and Toppin of New Mexico. Toppin won it for the media. All right, so like a lot of awards there. And so we'll start with New Mexico. Basically, they lost the aforementioned Toppin, who was really wasn't a high recruit. I believe he was a 3-star coming in, but man, he played like a 5-star. They also had the explosive backcourt of Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn. House went to the pros. Mashburn has transferred to Temple. But they do bring back Donovan Dent, their point guard, who was outstanding last year as a sophomore. They bring back Nelly Joseph, who played well coming over from Iona. True Washington, who had a solid freshman season last year for New Mexico. He's a shooting guard. And Mustafa Amzil from Dayton last year was a key reserve for them. They also did a very nice job in the portal, bringing in CJ Nolan. He's a former 4-star, was like a top 60 recruit, started at Oklahoma, then went to North Texas. Still hasn't quite hit his potential, but he had a solid year with North Texas last year. Philip Borovikian from Arizona is another one of those bigs I talked about, European bigs that has a lot of upside, was pretty highly regarded. He sat out last year, I believe, with injury. They bring in Atiki, the backup center for BYU, who's an athletic shot blocker. So, Drew, I mean, Jake, what do you make of New Mexico? Are they the cream of this crop?
I think there's 4 teams that could win and be at the top, and there's certainly one of them. Even with the JT Toppin loss, really sucks to lose.
Didn't he leave like at the buzzer too? Wasn't it like a really last second?
I believe it was one of the later ones for sure. Yeah. It was one of the later ones. So he goes to Texas Tech. But if you bring him back, I mean, they have a really good starting 5. I still think it is a good one anyway. I think True Washington's going to take a leap here. He's going to provide some defense that they certainly need.
Yeah, but, I mean, he averaged, I think, well over 2 steals a game.
And that was playing behind 3 guards as well.
Yeah, right.
And he was a top 100 guy. I think was he 98? I mean, he was right around that.
He was a 4-star.
And, there was just 3 vet guards in front of him, even though Dent's only going to his 3rd year. Like, he plays like he's way older. I think Dent's going to be player of the year as he spearheads the attack here. I mean, can get by people, can get to the basket, so fluid with the ball in his hands. Like, he really is a nice player and one of the best players that's not in a major conference. He really is good. And I think True takes that step. They're going to need defense. I think True provides that for him. Nelly Jr. Joseph, although not the most switchable guy, can provide the rim protection inside. They added Atiki, who can be another big, long athlete off the bench. Hopefully Phillip can stay healthy and provide that depth at the big man position. I think Amzil can be a good piece, as he probably starts at the 4 for this team. I think he can be a nice piece. Will shoot the ball a little bit better and will play a little bit better stepping into a starting role. So defense, I think, certainly is a concern a little bit. I think that has been with this team. Losing Toppin really stinks. It does, because he's such a good player, and I think would have been the perfect guy to explode even more in his 2nd year playing the 4. But it's still a really good team. It is still a really good top 4 team, potentially a team that will win this conference. I think I'm going to spoil it a little bit. Dent's going to be my player of the year. When he doesn't have to play with House and doesn't have to play with Mashburn, he's going to explode. I mean, he's going to be one of the best scorers in the country this year now that the keys are completely handed to him. And he's got and he's going to have the ball in his hands even more. So a really good team, a good portal, good guys returning, and potentially the best player in this conference, Donovan Dent.
Yep. Anything to add, Drew?
No, that's pretty spot on. I think, as was the case last year, it's going to be super competitive. I have Dent as my leader. Again, spoiler, I actually have kind of like a 3-horse race for player of the year, because I think there's just so many guys who can play here. And they're all going to put up that 15 to 18 point range. They're all going to put down 3 to 6 assists. They're all going to pull down 3 to 6 boards. So Dent's a stud. Joseph is, I mean, we don't really talk about him, but the guy damn near averaged a double-double last year. Like, just does his job, does it well. And I think the addition of the two bigs coming in will be really nice for them. It's going to give them that size and that athleticism to bang with not just the teams in the Mountain West, but, as they match up with those other Power 5 programs, they're going to have bodies to throw. I think I can totally see them finishing first. I can see them finishing fourth, but that's not a knock on them. That's more of just a positive spin on how this conference is always really fun to watch and always competitive.
No. Then we move down to the regular season champion, Utah State. And of course, they lose great Osobor to Washington. Darius Brown moved on to the pros. Josh Udui transferred to San Jose State. He's a nice athletic defender. Khalifa Sacco moved on to Sam Houston State. Jake and I talked about him in previous episodes. He was a nice backup shot blocker. But they do still bring back three key pieces. Ian Martinez, ultra athletic shooting guard. Mason Falslav, who was tremendous last year as a freshman point guard, certainly has room for growth. And Isaac Johnson, who really started to come on kind of toward the end of the year, where Osobor would take up, the space in the paint. Johnson is 6'10", but he can shoot it. He really can shoot it. He was a former 4-star who just seems to be rounding into form. And they also hit the portal with a bunch of guys. Nobody who really, to me, stands out, but a lot of players who were solid at their previous schools. Abin Gederetse comes over from Stetson, a solid center, defensive center, kind of more than anything. And then we have Dayton Albury, a scorer, coming over from Queens. I think those two guys are probably going to start on this team. We also have Tucker Anderson coming over from Central Arkansas and a couple other guys. So they certainly have plenty of bodies on this team, but can they overcome losing their two best players from last year? What do you think, Drew?
I think that I don't think people realize how close we were to this being a very, very, very big fall from grace. If I remember correctly, Martinez and Falsalev were both in the portal. Both did come back, which, obviously huge gates. You have a starting backcourt that, at this level can give you 12 to 15 a night. So that's big. I like Isaac Johnson a lot. I think he's going to take that next step, and that will kind of be their big three. I think they're still going to be in the mix. I think those three keep you competitive, and I think they brought in enough guys that you like to think one or two will stick, and that's really what they need. They're not going to be as good as last year. I mean, they didn't bring in anybody that jumps off the page. I'm not super familiar with a lot of the games here of the new guys coming in. I mean, obviously, Dexter Cano came from Oregon State, but didn't really do much there. A lot of these guys were more like the vision of what they can be is there, but they haven't executed on that yet. So they have a core three that I like. Almost lost two of those three. Thankfully, they didn't. So we'll see, but I definitely think there's a bit of a drop-off. I mean, I don't think. There's going to be a bit of a drop-off from last year's, they won 28 last year, and they had a good year last year. They almost won 30 games, so we'll see.
Jake, Albury put up 17 points a game last year for Queens, coming from JUCO. Also shot 48% from the floor and 36% from deep. Can he be anything like that in the Mountain West?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say because this really is nearly a high major league. I mean, it's a high major league, I think, without the label on it. So it's tough. For these ASUN guys, are they, can they make this jump? Because this is a really, really good league. It's not like the West Coast where there's a very, very heavy top. This is a really, really good league. In the top middle of the pack. There's a lot of really good coaches. There's a lot of really good atmospheres. This is a tough league to play in with altitude. There's so many factors that makes this conference so great. So it's tough to say if these ASUN guys can make the transition into a league where there's really pro bodies and athleticism and length and playing styles. So it's tough to say, but the core three coming back are really good. Falsalev was awesome last year. Martinez was very good. Isaac Johnson and Templin to provide some size too is nice with the holdovers, but there's just so much on the way out. Osobor was a monster on the boards. Was a monster inside. Darius Brown, really good defender, the head of the snake. Uduje was a really good 6-man. He was in the running for 6-man in the league. Like there's questions with the newcomers, but we just know they're losing so much. But here's the deal. Jared Calhoun's a very good coach. I think he will be good here with the history of Utah State. I think they can be 4th or 5th. I think they're still going to be at the top here. I think they're still going to be at the top here. And if you hit on some of these guys, then they could even rise even more. So they're still going to be very good, but there's question marks with the newcomers. Hell, there was question marks with the newcomers last year because the whole team was
a valid point.
Yeah, I mean,
So
great Osobor came from Big Sky, right?
Yeah, him and Darius Brown both came from Montana State. And Uduje was from Coastal Carolina, I believe. Like everybody was new, ended up winning the conference. I don't see that happen a second year in a row, but like there's not as many questions, I guess, as there were last year. I guess like we knew Danny Sprinkle could coach, we knew Osobor and Darius Brown were good, but the year they had last year was tremendous. I don't think will ever be I don't think that will ever be replicated again in a very good conference to bring back everybody, not a single minute, and to play the way they did. I don't think we'll ever see that again. But they're still going to be very good, even with a new coach and a nearly brand new roster. They will still contend, especially if they hit on the ASUN guys.
Right. One team that brings back a good portion of their core, though they do lose their starting backcourt, both all-conference players, and that's Nevada with Keenan Blackshear went to the pros. Jared Lucas went to the pros. They also lose their 6-man, Hunter McIntosh, who was kind of like a combo guard. But they bring back arguably their best player from last year, Nick Davidson, their big man, Trey Coleman, who's an outstanding defender. Tyler Rollison, going to be taking over at point guard. He was a high recruit a couple years ago. Daniel Foster is a steady presence at the wing. And KJ Himes is still around as a shot blocker. But instead of going the recruiting path, Nevada's been pretty good at recruiting of late. They hit the portal and they bring in 2, maybe 3 really exciting guys in Kobe Sanders, a small forward who really is like 6'10", but he's a small forward from Cal Poly. Xavier Dussel, a scoring guard, a very solid scoring guard from Fresno State, and Justin McBride, who was a high recruit at Oklahoma State, but didn't get a lot of playing time. But this, to talk about Sanders, who I find intriguing, at 6 foot. Oh, actually, I'm wrong. I thought he was 6'10". It says it's 6'8" here. You can never tell with these heights, though. Half the sites have guys listed anywhere. Real GM has Utah State's. Is it Utah State? Hold on.
Yeah, everybody. I mean,
there's an inch added to Daniel.
No, it was one team though that really shocked me. It's Colorado State Center. They have Real GM has them listed at 6'8", and the school has them listed at 7 foot.
That's what everybody does. That's probably the size with shoes and maybe some insoles, and that's what everybody.
No, what I'm thinking is Real GM. He didn't really play for 2 years, and I'm thinking Real GM has his height from 2 years ago. That's what I'm thinking. But anyway, with Sanders, we'll go with a 6'8", but last year he averaged 20 points per game last year, shooting 46 from the field, 34 from deep, 87 from the free throw line, and also 3.2 assists per game, but only 3.7 rebounds per game for a big guy. Definitely a small forward, definitely a bucket getter. And Dussel was very solid. I mean, there's nothing you could complain about, his game. Played in this conference last year, put up close to 12 points per game, shot 42 from the field and 40 from deep, 83 from the line. So you got 2 solid guys coming in to replace the 2 solid guys going out the door. You got to kind of wonder, and we may have a Nevada player interview a Nevada player soon. Not sure who that's going to be, but I'm kind of interested with Rollison, who's kind of a small, quick guy, versus Keenan Blackshear, who was kind of more of a power guy who like to post up and, abuse smaller point guards in the paint. I think Rolison, this is going to be a more dynamic team, a running team, more pick and roll. Sometimes Nevada, as good as Kerry Blackshear was, sometimes their offense will really get bogged down. And if Jared Lucas wasn't hitting, or if they weren't getting him the ball, they could have some really ugly nights. I think it improved last year over the year before, and maybe that a lot goes to the Nick Davidson being able to stretch the floor. But yeah, obviously we know a lot about Nevada. We've had Nevada guys on the show. We always have at least one Nevada guy on the show every year. So what are you thinking about this team, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the defense is still going to be there. I think Nick Davidson can be even better. He was very good last year as a big body in the paint who could also stretch the floor. You'd like to see that move up even more as far as the 3-point percentage goes because they're going to need it. And when you lose a guy like Jared Lucas, who, his off-ball shooting and his off-ball movement, like it was.
I mean, he was always led the nation in like off-ball scoring, off-screen shooting. Tremendous off-screen shooter.
Yeah, could shoot off movement, could shoot in awkward spots, like could really manufacture buckets when you needed it and when you really needed something. So losing a guy like that, there's offensively, they're certainly going to look a lot different because there's not a guy that can replicate that. And then Keenan Blackshear on both ends, being a guy that could defend multiple positions.
Yes,
being a guy who is who could break down the defense in the paint. Like you said, I mean, he was a matchup problem for a lot of teams in this conference and really everywhere. So losing those two guys is huge. But I do like Rolison's speed and his quickness. I think that will be big for them that they have a guy like that. And he's going to have to assume the point guard role here. Now, I think Kobe Sanders is interesting as well because, I mean, his size-wise, I think he can replicate Blackshear a little bit. I think that's the point of bringing him in. Like, you have a guy that can score, that can play make at that height and do a lot of things and have that kind of positional size.
Right.
But shooting is going to be something that they're going to need. Ducell is going to provide that. How about Ducell on his third Mountain West school from Wyoming to Fresno State, now to Nevada? So he's really going to have to shoot for this team to be good, but defensively, that's why they're going to be at the top of the conference once again. We know KJ Himes will never stay healthy, unfortunately,
but they do bring in another shot blocker and Brandon Love from Texas State. Excuse me.
And that's what they're going to need because when Himes is out there, he's one of the best shot blockers in the conference. You just know that something is going to happen, unfortunately, because he's banged up every year.
Yep.
But defensively, with Trey Coleman, who's one of the best wing defenders in this conference, can
in the country, perhaps.
Yeah, can take out the best player on another team. Defensively, that's why this team is going to be so good. I think offensively they'll have enough to figure it out, but defensively, that's why they're going to be in the running for the tournament again, and the running at the top of the conference.
Drew, what are your thoughts?
The only thing I was going to add, and you touched on it, Rich, was Love. I just think he's like that. He's a proven insurance policy kind of for that back line that will, is he going to give him 10-5 and a block and a half a game like he did in Texas State? Probably not, just based on minutes. But that it's in the chamber if you need it. And because Himes can't stay healthy, you're going to need it. So I think that just gives them that boost. I think everything else was spot on. I think Ducell, you're bringing in guys like a Xavier Ducell, who have done it. There's no worry that if it's going to translate, is it going to fit? A lot of the questions we've had as we talk about all these transfers is, well, it's a step up. Are they going to be able to handle? There's no question. He's done it twice in the Mountain West now, and now he's going to a team where he's going to be asked to do it again. So this team, it's hard, but I wouldn't be shocked if I saw this team win the conference. I mean, again, there's 4 teams that could probably win this conference, but I think they've got a lot of pieces that make it really interesting.
Right. And we'll move on to UNLV. And here's a team, they probably didn't lose any household names, but for people like us who follow it, we know these guys and we know the talent they have there. And that's the Boone twins, Caleb and Keelan. And they also lose Luis Rodriguez. And between Caleb Boone, who is playing pro ball, and I think Luis and Keelan are waiting to see if they get a G League deal. but Luis Rodriguez was a great wing defender. Started off at Ole Miss, but we're talking a lot of athleticism and size here, positional size. But still, the cupboard's not bare for UNLV. We have Dayton Thomas, who we talked to a lot of people, freshman last year. A lot of thought he was newcomer of the year, certainly freshman of the year. Jalen Hill, kind of another workman, kind of do everything guy who can play multiple positions. Started off at Oklahoma. He missed most of last year with injury. He should be back this year. Rob Whaley, who was kind of his replacement last year as a freshman, was a high energy guy, big, strong, burly guy who will mix it up with anybody, big rebounder. And Isaiah Cottrell, West Virginia fans might remember him. He's another guy like Himes that can never stay healthy, but when he's out there, his physical presence, solid shot blocker. They too hit the portal with some no real household names. The guy I really like that they signed was Jace Whiting of Boise State. I really think this is Boise State's going to miss Whiting because I think he was in line for big minutes starting role this year, and I think he's going to plug right in to the starting lineup as a combo guard to complement Dayton Thomas. They also had two 100 top 150 recruits in Pape Njai and James Evans. Evans is a wing. Njai is a center, and I think he might actually get some playing time this year because, like I said, Isaiah Cottrell is just not overly reliable. Drew, you look at this, nobody beside Dayton Thomas really pops, but they seem to have a lot of bodies, decent depth, Midland team, or maybe.
Yeah, I think this is a team that's going to compete by committee outside of Thomas. I think he's like the one guy that I'm pretty confident penciling in will have like that first team all conference upside. I mean, he was the co-freshman of the year last year, I believe. Like he's done it then. He's only going to get better now. Jalen Hill is back. He did tear his ACL very early in the season last year. And I mean, he was about 11.6 boards a game, if I'm not mistaken. So, small sample size from last year, but he should give them a bit of a boost. I think everywhere else across this board, it's going to be kind of by committee. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. I think it's just going to be one where we see Thomas is the alpha. Maybe Hill can get back to that pre-injury form, but even then it was a relatively small sample size. And I think everybody else is going to have their moments. So I think there's a lot of, Mountain West athletes, Mountain West bodies, guys who have some, proven Division I players. I just don't think there's enough when we look at some of these other teams where we're talking about teams rolling out, two guys who are Mountain West, all conference potential guys or player of the year guys or, defensive player of the year guys. Thomas Jr. is going to have a massive year, I think. Like he's going to have to be the player of the year for this team to really go anywhere. But, they won 21 games last year. Do they win 20 plus this year? I don't, in this conference, don't really feel it. But, who knows? They have the bodies to make it interesting and competitive. I just don't know they have the skill.
Yeah, almost kind of like where they were last year. Yeah, they were just kind of on the edge. Jake, what are your feelings on the Running Rebels?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, Dayton Thomas is awesome, one of the best players in this conference, maybe a dark horse for the player of the year. I just think that the player of the year is going to go to a team that's going to finish above them.
Right.
And I'm still waiting for, the Kevin Kruger, breakout. I'm still waiting for UNLV to come back.
Yeah.
And be a perennial top team in this conference.
What's a shame is Dayton Thomas is not just one of the best point guards in this conference. He's one of the best point guards in the country. But
exactly.
He needs somebody to work off of.
Yeah. And I think Whiting can be a nice piece. Jalen Hill, I mean, I think he's another 6th-year guy. He was a Lon Kruger guy, I think, actually, way back at Oklahoma. Yeah. So I've always been a fan of Hill, like defensively. He's got some athleticism, some length. We'll see if that athleticism still holds up coming back from the knee injury. But I think he can be a nice piece. But they are losing a lot of defense with the Boons. And Cottrell, Rob Whaley, I think some guys can pick up the slack, but those were two good defenders there. Two good, big, rugged defenders. And
Rodriguez, too. I mean, he was a physical specimen.
So, yeah, they're losing a lot of defense, but with Hill coming back, I think it'll help soften that blow. Rob Whaley, I think, can have a big year, but the rest of the problem is, Rich, like the rest of the transfer class, like I'm not really too crazy about. Like I think Rishwain could be pretty good, but he followed Todd Golden to Florida and it just never worked out for him there. Like DePaul was one of the worst, maybe the worst, like Power Six, if you include the Big East and the Power Six teams ever.
Yeah.
Roberts still hasn't had a good year since Max Asmus left. Like, I'm not really too crazy about the rest of the transfers, even though I like the guys that they're bringing back, and I think that's going to hold them back from being a top four.
Yeah, it gives them solid depth, but nothing to push them, toward the top.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to Boise State, and here I think we have three Conference Player of the Year candidates in Tyson Degenhart, who we've had on the show, Omar Stanley, who we will have on the show, and Alvaro Cardenas, who was the point guard for San Jose State, was excellent point guard, excellent playmaker, good shooter. He comes in as a transfer. The problem I see with this team is they really got smacked in the at the guard position. Max Rice graduates, the coach's son. Chibuzo Agbo moves on to USC. Great three-point shooter, a good bucket getter. Roddy Anderson, a great on-ball defender, goes to Xavier. And then you use the aforementioned Jace Whiting, who was a really handy reserve last year, who this team could start on this team now. So my question is, they also bring in two other bigs recruits to complement their already existing bigs, and Dylan Anderson and Dominic Parlin from Lehigh. They're both center-like players. Anderson, I believe, is 7'1" or 7'2", another Arizona guy, didn't play much. Last year, they used Stanley a lot at center and Degenhart at the 4. They would put Stanley on the opposing team's center. He's really not built for that. They list him at 240. He does not look 240. I'm going to ask him about that because he's really athletic. He's got a quick first step. And I just don't see him being 240. He looks more like 220 to 225 maybe. I really think that this team's best lineup, given their dearth of guards, might be Cardenas at point, and one of their holdovers from last year. Neither are played much. Would that be Andrew Meadow or Chris Lockett, who was a redshirt last year? Use Stanley at the 3, use Degenhart at the 4, and use Anderson at the 5. Now, I don't know if that's going to work. I'm going to ask Omar about that as well. But that's the only way I see how this team functions, because unless one of these guards, you have freshman Ethan Lathan too, or excuse me, I'm sorry, he's the center. Freshman Moses Hips was a 3-star coming in. So, Lockett, Meadow, or Hips, one of those guys is really going to have to step up big time here. So what do you think, Jake?
Yeah, size-wise, there's a whole lot to like. They bring back their starting front court with Degenhart and Stanley. They bring in Dylan Anderson. Like, size-wise, I have no issues at all, and Degenhart can be one of the players of the year in this conference, his ability to stretch the floor. Guard, you're absolutely right. So in addition to these two recruits, they bring in this guy, Javon Buchanan from JUCO, who was one of the best players in JUCO last year. I've heard a lot about this guy.
NAIA, Jake.
Yeah, he can play a bunch of different positions. I actually heard a stat on 3-Man Weave the other day that he actually led his team in post-up possessions and ball screen possessions. How about that? Have you ever seen a guy do that before? So
no.
I want to see this guy play because I'm hearing a lot about him, but guard-wise, you lose Max Rice, you lose Roddy Anderson, you lose Jace Whiting. Like, that's what it's going to come down to. Size-wise, it's good. They have enough to compete at the top of the conference, but guards is what I think could be the Achilles heel. Cardenas was a good player at San Jose State, can shoot the rock. Like, he's a good pickup, but they're just going to need more here from the exodus of guards they have going out. But they're going to be at the top of the conference because they have the size and the skill, and Stanley was really good. bouncing back from St. John's. Degenhart, one of the best players in this conference. But guards is going to be a big question. But put a pin. I hate to use some corporate lingo. Put a pin in this Javon Buchanan guy because I think he can be a player for them.
All right. What do you think, Drew? Do you know anything about Buchanan?
Yeah, having been in the NAI, I heard the name. I went back and watched. The kid can play. I'm not going to sit there and go project like a Riley Minix transition where who goes on and like dominates.
And what's his natural position?
I believe he played like the 3-4. He's 6'7", 210. Absolute stud in the NAI. First team all NAI, All American. He kind of does a little bit of everything. I mean, he's not really a playmaker, so he's probably more of a 4, but he had 40 blocks, 40 steals, scored a little over 700 points in the season last year, just looking up some of the numbers. He can absolutely play. Yeah, and he's probably more of a 4. Let's see, I don't know. Can he shoot? I'm not sure if he's much of a shooter here, so take a look really quick at his. Yeah, I mean, he shot 35% on 117 attempts last year. So I mean, he was universally, without a doubt, one of the best because he actually played against Arizona Christian, which was like the star team in the conference I was from. So I watched that game and he won, and he went for like 24-8 or something against them. And Arizona Christian's like really good. They're like a perennial like Final 16 NAIA team. So yeah, he can definitely play. We'll
but
see.
He sounds like another big, not.
Yeah, he is. No, he's not gonna. He's really athletic. So, I mean, they want to go like jumbo package and put him at like the 3, Stanley at the 5, and Degenhart at the 4. I could see that working. But again, we just got to, it goes back to the question, can he do it at a much higher level? And this is a big jump. Like, this isn't him coming to the WCC or him coming to like the Big Sky. He's coming to the Mountain West, which is going to probably traditionally has like 5 or 6 tournament caliber teams. So we'll see. But to the eye test, kid can absolutely play.
Okay. So next up is San Diego State, the one team in this conference that actually has a lot of luck, or I won't say luck, a lot of success in the NCAA tournament. But I don't know, man. They are losing a ton this year. A lot of talent, including, depending on who you ask, Player of the Year, Jaden Ledee. They're also losing Defensive Player of the Year. Ledee, by the way, went to the pros. Lamont Butler goes to Kentucky. Darian Trammell goes to the pros. Micah Parrish, steady 3-and-D wing for them, goes to Ohio State. Elijah Sanders, an up-and-coming young forward for them, goes to Virginia. And Jay Powell, who was a solid reserve for the team, graduated. So that doesn't leave much left. I'd say the one player that was coming back that has star potential is Miles Bird. It's kind of a versatile small forward. Probably could play maybe the 4, maybe the 2. Yeah, definitely the 2. I don't know about the 4. You got Reese Waters, a former USC guy at the wing. He's, again, a solid player. Center Miles Heide comes back, didn't get a lot of playing time last year, and BJ Davis, who was their top freshman last year, also didn't get a lot of playing time. So they hit the portal and did a pretty nice job, though they kind of went point guard heavy. They brought in 3 point guards who were really successful at their past schools. I'm not sure what they're going to do with them all. And it's kind of funny because a lot of teams in this conference really only seem to have 1 point guard, and San Diego State has brought in 3, and they already had 1. And those 3 point guards are Nick Boyd from Florida Atlantic, Wayne McKinney from San Diego, and Kimo Ferrari from Brown. They also brought in Jared Coleman-Jones, who could power forward center, who may have a chance to start on this team because they really don't have a lot of bigs. In the recruiting, they got almost a 4-star player in Farrell Compton, who's a power forward. I expect he to get a significant amount of playing time this year. They also brought in another 3-star wing, Taj DeGorville, I'm going to say. Anyway, he's 3-star, probably won't play much this year. So, Drew, San Diego State, is there a lot of hope here? I mean, I don't see this team being bad, but I just don't know if they're going to be good.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those programs where they've just built up the goodwill. We know here's what we do know. They're going to play hard, they're going to defend, they're going to be well coached. Like we know that to be true. But like asking any program to replace a Ledee, a Butler, a Trammell is a lot. I don't. I mean, I think Nick Boyd's a sneaky good pickup. I think he's got potential, like newcomer of the year vibes to him. He comes from a very similar, like a mid-major, but like played very well. But I just don't see a lineup here that night in and night out can compete with the best in the Mountain West. I mean, maybe I'm just so used to kind of plugging and playing San Diego State. That's number one, and I'll fill in the rest as I go. That just isn't the case here to me. Like you're projecting all these guys to kind of hit their peak. Like this team can't really afford anybody to underperform or to like have like
we're so used to big bodies at San Diego State,
like
and
high level
team,
asee.
Yeah,
I just don't see. I mean,
this team is almost all guards.
Well, and the three guards you bring in, Boyd's like a solid 6'3", 6'4", probably, but like McKinney's 6 feet tall. I mean, very familiar with him. Kimo Ferrari, not super familiar with him. I just looked up; he's 6 feet tall, and I'm like, I'm used to San Diego State, like I said, at a minimum, deploying high level athletes who are going to play hard and make life hell for you on your offensive, like on the defensive end. I don't know if they're going to have the capacity to do that against the best of the best. I think again, it might be more of a skill issue where they're going to do all the things that they're going to do everything right. And I don't know if it's going to be enough because I just don't know if they're talented enough. They're going to run into guys. Like, what are they going to do against the Boise State that's going to trot out potentially 3 guys that are 6'7" plus that are also all super skilled, can all score, can all rebound? What are they going to do against a Davidson from Nevada? Kind of those are the questions I have. And who knows? Maybe they just play at a super, super fast tempo. They let the guards loose and they just push the ball and, they get shots up. But yeah, this is not the San Diego State roster I'm used to seeing. I'm used to a lot more size and a lot more athleticism.
Yeah. Jake, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so this has been like one of my favorite teams the last couple of years. That's who I'm staying up to watch with the way they play. And yeah, they are certainly losing a lot. But they have some scoring with Nick Boyd, with Wayne McKinney. Kimo Ferrari's a really fast, twitchy guy. He's actually a San Diego native. Makes sense for him coming back home. But I actually, like, size-wise, I think they're going to be okay. It's just, like, who's going to emerge as a shot blocker? They have Heidi, not really much of a shot blocker or a crazy athlete. Jared Coleman-Jones might have to be that guy. Here's another guy I want you to think about. Redshirted last year, 7-footer. Magoon Gwath, who they just call Goon, which is a great name. I think he's gonna have to be the guy that does that for them. I actually like this team like quite a bit more. I still think they're gonna be top 4 and can contend to win the league. I trust Brian Dutcher. I like some of the pieces they have coming back. Reese Waters is going to have to be more consistent in the scoring department, and he's going to have more on his plate now that they're losing. I mean, to have a guy like Ledee, like just out of nowhere. I mean, he was playing good minutes, but he was playing behind Nathan Mensah, and then he just exploded last year. You have a guy that can shoot from the free throw line that was a bully inside who got fouled by everybody and drew a ton of fouls. Like, offensively, they're certainly going to miss that, and they're not really going to replicate that. Now, I do think the 2 freshmen they bring in, I like Farrell Compton. I think Taj DeGorville is going to play in this lineup as well. I think they're going to have to. And with the size that they have, they're going to be able to play. But, like, you look at, I think there actually is a bit of upside here. Because I think Bird, like, if he can put it all together, Bird was really good at times last year.
Oh, yeah.
He can defend. He's got some really nice athleticism. If he could shoot the ball more consistently, like Bird has some serious upside to grow into a big-time player for them this year.
Yeah, sometimes he gets himself in his own trouble. He lets his emotions get him, take him out of the game.
Yeah, or there's a turnover. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's absolutely like some self-inflicted wounds with Miles Bird, but I really like him. And the stuff I saw last year when it was good, it was really good.
Yep, I agree. That's why I said he was the one player on this team I really think could be a star. He might be the next San Diego State star.
Yeah, and I really think he can. but they're losing a lot, and I understand that. But I think they can, with the Magoon Guath, with the Jared Coleman-Jones, they can have enough rim protection to still be solid. The defense will be good. And I think offensively, there's a lot to like here as well. So they're a team that can win the conference. They're certainly going to be in the top 4. With what Dutcher just did the last 2 years, I'm not going to put them out of the top 4.
I hear you.
I still think they can certainly contend.
I hear you. All right, we'll move on to Colorado State, a team that I probably thought maybe shouldn't have made the tournament last year. Certainly could have made an argument one way or the other. And they lose Mr. Everything for them, Isaiah Stevens, one of the best point guards in the country. They also lose Joel Scott, who only played there 1 year, but he was very solid as an inside presence, rim protector, just a good defender. He's playing in Germany. Patrick Cartier moved on to the pros. He also is playing in Europe. Joe Palmer, Headband Joe, good three-point shooter. He's graduated. Josiah Strong, competent reserve player coming off the bench at the wing spot. He too has a job in Europe. What do they bring back? They bring back Neat Clifford, who's obviously one of the best 3-and-D players in this conference. He is a stat sheet stuffer and a player of the year candidate. They also bring back combo guard Jalen Lake, who has great size for a combo guard, but has yet to really get a lot of minutes and actually put up a lot of big numbers. They bring back Rashawn Bemba, who put up really nice numbers as an energetic freshman off the bench. And then in the portal, probably they bring in some really solid players from the portal, including Keyshawn Williams, who averaged 18 points a game 2 years ago at Northern Illinois, but actually in that season, he suffered an injury and really wasn't able to come back last year. So now he's a year and a half removed from that injury. Hopefully he's back in good shape. He's good size for a shooting guard at 6'4", solid shooter. He's a bucket getter. So he's a nice compliment to Clifford, who's more of a defensive oriented player. Then the center I talked about, Nikola Dapa, who didn't play at LIU. He's transferring in from LIU, but he didn't play there. The last time he played was 2 years ago in Europe for professionally, not as a professional, but played for a professional team. I think he played for KK Mega. Guy's 7 foot. And that's about all we could say at this point. He put up okay numbers with Mega. Of course, he was pretty young at the time. He will be needed on this team, though, because this team doesn't have a ton of size. They also bring in Ethan Morton from Purdue, who was a defensive specialist for the Boilermakers, and Jalen Crocker Johnson, Little Rock, solid transfer, put up some solid numbers for Little Rock, potentially could start on this team if they don't want to go with Bemba at the power forward spot. My concern with this team, is at the center position, because we have no idea what we're going to get out of Dapa. But the other thing is Jalen Lake replaces Isaiah Stevens. Wow. I mean, and what else have they got here at guard? Really, I mean, this team is mostly wings and bigs. Who's gonna be distributing the ball after they had one of the best playmakers in the country for 5 years, and now they're gonna go with Jalen Lake? I just don't know if this is gonna work. I mean, lots riding on Jalen Lake, if you ask me, Jake.
Yeah, and they're also bringing in Bowen Bourne from Northern Iowa, who was hurt last year but was really good the year before. So a lot. The thing is, like, you're going to have a drop off at point guard. He's Isaiah Stevens is one of, if not the best player in the history of the program. Could get you a bucket anytime you needed it. Could distribute the ball. Could get into the teeth of defense. Like, you name it, he did it. He was incredible. So to lose a guy like that, their offense is going to suffer. They're not going to be able to score. Like, they don't have like Nick Clifford's going to have to be that, and maybe Keyshawn Williams are going to have to be that guy that can get them a bucket when they need it. But a lot hinges on Bowen Bourne here if he can stay healthy and do what he did at Northern Iowa prior to last year when he was hurt. Because like you're one of the best players in the conference the last 5 years, one of the best players in the history of the school, leader in assists, leader in points. Like there's going to be a drop off simply because of that. So guard play, there's certainly questions, and everybody around, like Isaiah Stevens made everybody better to the point where their offense is like individually, it's going to hurt as well having a guy like that who can just distribute and score and play make so easily. So I still think they can be solid. Morton is a defender, like cool. He can't shoot though is the problem. Keyshawn Williams is going to have to score a lot.
Yeah.
And I think a problem that they ran into now that when they lost to Texas, they just didn't have the athleticism to match up with them, and that really hurt them. But like they did go up against the Big 12, or now an SEC school, as weird as that is to say. So athleticism-wise, there's still questions because they lose Joel Scott, they lose Cartier. Joe Palmer was actually he was a fun player to watch. He really was a nice player for them. So there's size and athleticism concerns a little bit, but mainly it's losing Isaiah Stevens. Not a guy you're going to replace by any means.
Right.
And that's offensively, they're going to suffer a lot because of that.
Do you think this team is worse or better than UNLV?
I have them right in the same area. I think I would still put Colorado State right above it. They got a better coach, and I think Medved's still going to be able to get it done. Like he has performed well enough that I think it's tough. I almost want to say maybe the floor is a little bit higher just because I know what I'm going to get with Medved. Like I think he's going to be able to figure it out, and offensively they're going to be all right, even taking the Isaiah Stevens hit. So to answer your question, I'll take Colorado State. Probably by like a slimmer margin than you think, but I'll take Colorado State.
They did survive last year without a rim protector. I first said that Joel Scott protected the rim. He didn't. He was a good defender, but one thing he didn't do was block shots. Cartier, too, had nice size, but he didn't block shots. You know, if maybe Dappa brings that element, or even, Crocker Johnson or the freshman Step, that would be something that they didn't have last year. So I guess you're right. I mean, the combination of Clifford and Williams is intriguing. Then if Lake with his size, like a 6'4", if he really can be a nice distributor, that's all he needs to do. Is get these guys the ball. And Morton and Clifford gives you two really great perimeter defenders. There is a lot to like here, but I don't know. What do you think, Drew? Does this team have a chance to make the tournament?
I think I love Nick Clifford. He's my favorite player in the conference. He basically is their Anton. He's the Mountain West's Anton Watson, in my opinion. Like just in terms of does literally.
I actually think he might be the best pro prospect right now in this conference.
Sure. Yeah, I love Nick Clifford. So I think you go into every game with like a decisive edge, knowing that, hey, we have a guy that's going to do everything we need, whether that's score the ball, rebound the ball, pass a little bit, do whatever he has to do. I agree that Lake is the X factor. For what it's worth, if he can revert back to his sophomore year, so what was that, 2 years ago, I think they'll be okay. He played just under 30 minutes a game. He didn't shoot the ball great. He was like a 42% guy, but he hit about 38% of his threes on pretty good volume, handed out about just under 3 assists a game. Look, you don't replace an Isaiah Stevens. There's just certain guys in your program history in general you can't replace, not even from a basketball standpoint, from just what they mean to the program and the comfort and the trust that guy has when you hand him the basketball at the start of a game. But if he can do what he did his sophomore year, and I'm not super familiar with his game, I'm not going to pretend to be like a savant, but just looking at what he was able to do 2 years ago, he absorbed starter level minutes, started in 22 games, was effective enough as a scorer, 7.5, and averaged, like I said, a hair under 3 assists. It should be enough for them to be relevant and competitive. Those two guys coming in with injury, was like Keyshawn Williams, are going to be key. If they can return to pre-injury form, think this team's actually this team's got a pretty good shot. If they are anywhere between, if they're not at least 80% of that kind of vibe, then it gets interesting because you just start wondering, what is the offense going to do? Like, how are we going to generate offense? So I agree with Jake. I would take them over UNLV, and a lot of that for me is just I think Nee Clifford is better than anybody that they can roll out and can do a little bit more.
Okay. Last year, San Jose State finished last in the conference, and they're losing arguably their two best players, two players that we mentioned before. One who went to the WCC and MJ Amy, and then Alvaro Cardenas went to Boise State. They were their two best players. And arguably they lost their top four players because Trey Anderson went to the pros, Tibet Gorner went to SMU, but they did bring in a slew of transfers led by Willie McClendon, who was a 4-star who never really got a shot at UCLA because of injuries. Is San Jose State destined for the basement, Drew, or do you think they're bringing enough here to maybe survive, to get out of the basement at least?
I think Tim Miles is a good coach.
Yeah.
So I'll get him. I think that keeps them out of the basement, but that's about it for me. I think that this team went 2-16 in conference play last year and got worse, like pretty unanimously worse, at least in my opinion. So I won't waste a bunch of time going through, but I think Miles is enough to keep them above, the bottom. I don't know by how much. I don't think they brought in enough to replace their top 4 scorers. You lose your top 4 scorers and don't really replace them in a conference that's this close and this competitive with proven guys. They will be big. They're going to have great size. They always do. They always can trot out a bunch of guys in that 6'8" to 6'10", 6'11" range. So I think that from a physicality standpoint, they'll look the part of a Mountain West team. But when it comes down to guys out on the wing, guys at the guard spots, I just don't see enough to replace the guys that walked out the door. And especially with Cardenas going to a rival, I think that's just kind of more salt in the wound, if anything.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of high hopes for this team, but I think Tim Miles is a good coach, and I think Tim Miles is going to be able to do enough on the whiteboard, X's and O's, while to get these guys out of the bottom. But I
just don't know where the scoring's coming from.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of these guys they brought in are pretty good defenders, especially I don't even know how you say. Is it Sadarine Hall?
Sadadrian.
Who
I think he just calls Day. So that could probably help you out a little bit.
All right. He's a really good defender, and the kid from the transfer from Utah State, Uduje, he's a good defender. They're both good athletes too, but who's going to score in this team?
That's my biggest problem. So
what do you think, Jake? Any hope for this team?
I'm with Drew. I don't want to put Tim Miles in the basement because I really like him, but I see some good pieces here. Maybe Will McClendon has some upside, but we haven't seen it, and there's been injuries, and Uduje was a good 6-man in this conference. I think is actually a very nice player. Joel Mariel is a massive body to put inside, but
Cole Mariel at one point was considered a top 20 recruit, but he's had injury troubles his whole since going back to high school.
There's just so many concerns, and I feel like these are good pieces, but okay, who's going to get us the bucket at the end of the game? Who's going to be that guy? And there's just too much on the way out that they couldn't restock the shelves to replace. So unfortunately, I think it's a shame. 2 years ago, this team had Amari Moore and Ibrahim Diallo, and I think they were the 5.
Yeah,
in the Mountain West tournament.
Yep.
And I thought Tim Miles was going to build here. This is another tough job, and it's another year in a row they just get ransacked by the portal. So I think maybe second to last. It wouldn't surprise me if it was last, though. There's just so much on the way out here.
Yeah. In the same way with the next team we're going to talk about, Wyoming, it's the same story. I mean, they lost their best player in Sam Griffin. who's now playing in the pros. He was a bucket getter, also could play make, and there's really not much coming back for Wyoming, but they hit the portal and they bring in a lot of guys, but most of these guys are either like high recruits or, highly regarded guys when they were coming in, but never quite lived up to potential. Guys like Jordan Nesbitt, who's started at South Carolina, I believe, and then went to Hampton, and Dante Allen, who started at Kentucky, then went to Western Kentucky. I think the most interesting guy, and Drew, you might know a little more about this guy coming from Denver, because I know you have some friends out in the and that's anyone know is it Tuco Tanamo? He's from
I think it's Tuco. Yeah, Tanyamo.
Yeah, and
Tanyamo.
he's a 6'9" kid from Finland, and his numbers, I mean, this is the perfect way you want to see a kid grow. The first year, freshman, 7.5 a game, and next year, 10.5 a game. Last year, almost 15.5 a game in points. He shot 47% from the field, 34% from three, 73 from the line. And actually, the year before, he was actually much more efficient. When he shot 52 from the floor and 42 from three, but last year on higher volume, his efficiency went down, but he also grabbed 7.7 rebounds per game. The rest of his numbers are not so impressive, but in terms of rebounding and scoring, and being able to shoot, it all seems to be there. He is the one player I think that really stands out that they brought in. All the other guys are kind of guys that never quite lived up to potential.
Yeah, I think that Tuco is going to probably I'm not 100% sure, but from what I've heard, I think he's going to be their best player next year. His trajectory's been awesome. They speak highly of him, like in terms of just he's gotten better. Like I don't really look at the efficiency, and I know this is what you were saying, Rich, but like, I think that's for him to go from where he was at. I mean, he was playing with, I believe, the nation's leading scorer last year, so he was playing in a secondary role anyways, and still like
Denver had some players last year.
Yeah, that's really good. Those are still good efficiency numbers for a guy who pretty substantially increased his workload. I mean, he went up to just around 12 shots a game from he was at like 7, I believe. I think he's going to be really solid, but I mean, this team lost so much. I think they lost their top 6 scorers or top 7 scorers, something like that. Like when your returning scorer is Kobe Newton at 4.5 points per game, that's like your top returning scorer.
Yeah,
it doesn't probably inspire a lot of confidence. So it sucks because Wyoming, I feel like, is another one of those programs that like just when you think like maybe they can kind of figure it out, I mean, then their guys all kind of bolt. Graham Ike comes in, 2 years ago, he's going to be the Mountain West Player of the Year. He averaged damn near 20 and 10, gets hurt and bolts. And you're like, well, there's a guy that we thought we had 2 more years of. I don't know. I think that they'll be interesting. I think they've brought in so many guys. I think kind of just by the odd, like the
and
a
new coach and a new coach.
I think the rule of odds is a couple guys will probably hit because there is pedigree here. But the only guy that I feel pretty confident about is Tuco. I think he's played at a, not at this same level, but he has multiple years of experience at a Division I level, has proven that he has improved. He has the size and the kind of core skills you need from like that 6'9" forward of he'll rebound, he can shoot a little bit, and he's generally able to get buckets. But like outside of that, I'm very uninspired.
Jake, it looks like AJ Willis, who was a freshman last year, I believe, for Holy Cross, and it didn't get. I think he played about 20 minutes a game last year. Are you familiar with Willis? Did you get a chance to see him in person? Well, I just thought, you being an East Coast guy, I
wasn't getting up to Worcester, Massachusetts.
Well, no, but I figured Holy Cross might cross paths with some of the Big 5 teams, or that you watch. So yeah, that looks like the keys to the car are going to be in his hands. That's another thing. New coach, bunch of new players, and a young point guard that's really not proven. Any hope for Wyoming?
I don't think so. And I think what's important to touch on with Wyoming is the situation, because this wasn't just like a normal coaching change. Like Jeff Linder left very late to take the associate head coach job at Texas Tech. That I think he's getting paid over $500,000 to do that.
Wow.
He's getting a nice payday. But Wyoming, like, there's not really like a geographical advantage. It's not like you can go locally to get players. Like, it's the least populated state in our country. Like, you
And
have to go.
It is. It also has the fewest colleges in the country too.
Yeah. So how, is this a play? Like, it just seems like a tougher job in this league. Like, well, can you sell people on going there where there's, you know what I mean? Like, the whole thing. Can you sell people on going to Wyoming? There's nothing really around there. Like, there's not really history. Like, it just seemed like there's a tough job for so many reasons. And I feel like Jeff Linder really maxed out with the portal now, losing guys like Ike. Noah Reynolds left last year to go to Green Bay and actually was playing for Sundance Wicks and then decided to go to TCU where he's going to join Brendan Wenzel. But the circumstances were very, very tough because it's not like a guy got fired or he left for another head coaching job. He left to be an associate head coach.
Right.
And like I said, my point was I think that Linder kind of maxed out getting this team, as an at-large a couple years ago. And it just seems like this is a really tough job. So Sundance Wicks is one, I think, besides maybe Florida A&M or maybe Maryland Eastern Shore was like the last guy hired in this cycle, that there wasn't much out there. A lot of people had already committed. They were in a very unique situation as far as a coaching change goes, to the point where, no, I don't think there's a lot of optimism because the circumstances really didn't allow for Sundance Wicks to then Doug Gottlieb takes over Green Bay and all those guys leave, and maybe some of them, you know what I mean? There's just so much going on here. And it's such, no, but legitimately.
I'm laughing, folks, because Jake's holding his head. He's like,
but you know what I mean? Like, this was such a unique, and you're seeing people do this. Dan Engelstad at Mount St. Mary's left Mount St. Mary's to be the associate head coach at Syracuse. Like, you're seeing this now with smaller conferences or maybe a tough job in a tough conference where, like, these positions almost become more enticing for a lot more money in a bigger league where, hey, I've done really well here. Maybe if I'm a top assistant on a good Big 12 team, that can, project me into another head coaching role at another school quicker almost. You know what I'm saying? Like, it really is such a unique coaching situation here and like a new sort of thing. So long story short, circumstances are weird. That's why I don't think they'll be very good this year. Transfers are kind of like, he didn't have his pick of the litter, pretty much.
Right. Last year, I can remember you and I, Jake, talking about Air Force, and I think we projected them to finish in the bottom of the conference, but they didn't. They've actually finished ahead of San Jose State, and we were talking about how tough it was to recruit there. I mean, you don't see many 7-foot pilots out there. They do have a 7-footer on their team. Wayne, I'm not even going to try. But anyway, Wesley Selakowski. I think I got that right. I think he might be 7'1", but they don't have a lot of height on this team. Usually do have good shooters. They lost 2 of their best 4-5 players last year. They returned 3, including Bo Becker. Who's probably quietly one of the better players in the country. Nobody talks about guys like 6'7", and he can shoot. I think he has an outside shot. I think he'll play in Europe if he wants, for sure. But if you look in our columns, nobody from the portal of significance, no notable freshmen coming in. So, Jake, Air Force going to avoid the basement, or are they?
It's going to be close. I mean, I think Fresno State, San Jose State, maybe Wyoming will join them down there. So we'll see who will be the bottom team. But they lose the best player, Ritus Petraitis, who goes to the ACC to play for the ACC
for
California Golden Bears. Yeah, weird. I'm not going to be. I'm like, that's going to.
By the way, he's a 7-foot point guard, really.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Or not a 7 foot, 6'7".
Yeah, awesome in this offense where there's a lot of cutting, a lot of movement.
Yeah.
Under Joe Scott, but again, this is another tough job where the portal can lose you a couple of your players, and
You can't
This is
do anything.
probably as hard of a job as there is in the country to get transfers to come in.
Right.
So you lose a couple guys like that, and you almost have no resource at your disposal to make up for that. So this is a hard job as it is. They did have a good year last year, but you lose 2 guys to the portal, one of which is your best player. Probably going to be toward the bottom and fall from that ranking that they had last year.
All right. And we're going to finish up with Fresno State, who lost a whole host of players. I'd say they lost 6 of their 7 best players, 7 of their best 8 players. So not much coming back. Nobody, I'd say the best player they got coming in from the portal is David Douglas, a shooting guard from Green Bay, and he doesn't really light my fire. The one thing I am excited about on this team is their recruiting class, their freshman recruiting class. Makan Diouf, a power forward, came in at number 124. He's a 4-star. And they also bring in Isaiah Bonga's little brother, Joshua Bonga, who's been playing professionally in the Rasta Vechta system in Germany. Hasn't put up great numbers, doesn't seem to be the same playmaker Isaiah Bonga is, and he's not as big. So you know how Isaiah Bonga is just like all arms and legs and a great defender, and he's turned into a very good shooter too. Isaiah Bonga is couldn't shoot at this age. He couldn't shoot at all. So anyway, interesting freshman, and I think both of those freshmen, if they don't start, they're going to be playing a lot of minutes for this team that doesn't seem to have much else.
Yeah,
Jake,
and I think they also. I think the Vance Wahlberg hire was like kind of met with some question marks, being a guy that's almost 70 years old in his late 60s.
Wow.
Take over here. I mean, he's been coaching for 40 years.
Wow.
But he was like, from what I read up on him, he's like the guy that started the motion offense, like started the dribble drive motion. So like he comes with that, but you know, longevity wise, like how much longer does he have left? Maybe he's Fran Dunfield coaching to his mid-70s, like he is at LaSalle right now, but they lose a lot. I'm going to be watching Enoch Boachi at Villanova a bunch this year. A big bruising big man with some power that they're leaving.
High recruit, he was.
Yeah, once upon a time at Arizona State. But they lose a lot. I don't know how this head coaching hire is going to work out for them. It seems like it's been met with a bunch of question marks, and there's not too much coming in. So I think Fresno State, Air Force, San Jose State, maybe Wyoming. I think this is your very clear.
I wonder if he brought someone in who's an understudy, such as his son or somebody else he's taken under his wing and calls Grasshopper.
Yeah, but this has also been. I hate to keep saying it, but like this is also kind of a hard job, and there hasn't been much success for a long time.
Again, you know, all these beautiful places to live, and they can't get anybody. Wyoming too, man. If you like downhill skiing or snowboarding or hunting, geez, or fishing.
Well, I don't know about that one, Rich. Fresno Pacific's the armpit of California.
Baby. I was gonna say California guy. Can you tell us if Fresno's any nice?
No? Oof! I was actually literally just there because the cross country team was running a race down there. It's about 3-ish plus hours away from the Bay Area. It's like the armpit of California, man.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
Not a lot going on. I don't have much to add.
Oh, okay. That's what was going to be my next question.
The only thing is, I think the bottom 3 teams are, to me, pretty clearly going to be Fresno, Wyoming, and San Jose State. Some formation of that.
Yeah.
I think I don't know.
Air Force too.
I think Air Force gets out just because they return 3 guys that they can trust to play, be productive. Like that is probably enough, I think, to elevate them just out. And then I'll go San Jose because I like Tim Miles, and I think Fresno, Wyoming might be duking it out down there. But we'll figure it out. That's
kind of funny that we all like Tim Miles. I'm sorry to see him get fired.
San Jose State's in my backyard. Rich, you know this. I was a big Omari Moore guy. I liked watching him play, especially those 2 years where he really kind of popped. The one funny thing is seeing Moore Seck's name pop up here is hilarious. He played at my rival high school, and not against me. Obviously, he's much younger, but that high school has some questionable recruiting tactics. He was supposed to be the next big thing. Their entire basketball team is like international students it's a bit wild.
That was that school in Arizona. what's the big school in Arizona? They basically have all Europeans.
Yeah. A lot of their team has they had a lot of guys that were from not the Bay Area somehow
Gotcha.
being able to afford to live in the Bay Area. So that's just kind of a funny full circle moment for me.
All right, so let's go over our predictions. We all like New Mexico to win the conference. Drew says the conference will get 4 bids: Colorado State, Nevada, and Boise. Jake says 1, 2, 3. Are you predicting 4 bids as well, Jake?
I think San Diego State's going to be on the bubble, but I think they could be I think they're not going to be the lock that they were the last 2 years. I think they're going to be on the bubble, but I think it could get there to 4. But I think 4 is the max. We're not going to see another 6-bid Mountain West.
I agree. I agree with you there. And I like Utah State, Nevada, and a 3rd. I think somebody out of UNLV, Boise, San Diego State, Colorado State, somebody is going to emerge as a good team, and we'll get 4 bids out of this conference. In terms of player of the year, we all went with Donovan Dent, though Jake says Tyson Degenhard or Dent. Drew says Dent, Degenhard, or Nick Clifford. We all went with Nick Clifford for defensive player of the year. For newcomer of the year, Jake likes Nick Boyd coming from Florida Atlantic. And Drew and I like Kobe Sanders coming from Cal Poly to pick up the scoring slack for Nevada. We've run a little long here, so what we're going to do is we're going to split our 2 interviews with our Mountain West guest, Omar Stanley of Boise State and Ian Martinez of Utah State. We're going to split that into a second episode that you can watch that will be put up at the same time as this episode. So I'm going to say good night. As always, I want to thank our listeners and I want to thank our special guests. If you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. We will be back next week to continue our college previews. We're going to do the American in the Atlantic 10 next week, and we will have more special guests. See you soon, folks.